Calling to order the Charlotte Selectboard meeting, Monday, July 9th, 2018, 6 p.m. First item on the agenda is to talk about Charlotte Housing Trust Fund Grant Program, update to policies and procedures. So we've set aside an hour, and an hour's up, we'll stop. And as we did another one of our policy, we just every time we had a meeting, we worked for an hour and took us several months to get that ordinance complete, but it worked effectively. So I think in most cases, you're working with neophytes in our understanding of affordable housing, and you've submitted a report to us dated May 29th. Where should we be starting is, I guess, the question. What are our objectives? Where do we want to go?
Well, maybe we can talk first of all what things that we don't think you should attack right off.
Okay.
One is not try to rewrite the land use regulations from this table just now.
Right.
Although there may be some things that you decide that would be good to feed back to the Planning Commission for them to consider as they do that work themselves. Because we've identified, as I'm sure you would too, if you read the two together, some things between this policy and the land use regs that ought to be coordinated and may currently be in conflict. But rather than wring our hands about that, our recommendation is that you take a look at the recommendations you just cited, the May 29th ones, and deliberate on those a little bit before we dive into any policy or any wordsmithing. And I've spent a little bit of time with the current draft of the policy and made some suggested red lines that I can share with you later.
Well, one of us dated 2011 or something?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, 2011.
January 24th, 2011, I think is the current policy. And so we are in a position to give you some specific feedback about that. But before you do that, we think you ought to take a look at the one-page May 29th recommendations. And even before that, Peter put together an answer to the question that was asked at a prior meeting, which is, what does this affordable housing definition thing mean? So that should be in your materials. And
It should or should not be?
Should be in your materials.
Dated June 18th.
Sounds about right. Yeah. So if you haven't gone through and looked at that and just informed yourself about what the concept is, maybe that's the best starting point.
I'm not sure I have that.
It was a separate handout that I just put in boxes, not collated with the packet.
This is the one you're
May I
talking
approach?
about.
I think
If you have an extra one, I'll take it.
This is what it looks like.
Oh, right here,
It's got-
June
It's
18th,
got a
yes.
table in it and everything.
I haven't studied it, but okay. And this is what again? This is Peter's comments?
Yeah, you want to put some gloss on that?
Yeah, this is an attempt, a question came up at your meeting, what is affordable housing? So this was an effort to try to focus. It can be a little bit elusive, it can be a little bit drowned out in numbers. It plays differently, and the definition is shifted slightly if you're talking about rental housing as opposed to for sale housing. And that's what this one-page document does. It doesn't invent any wheels. It just defines what has already been defined in the regs and then accepted around the state. By way of just summary, the definition of affordable for housing that is owned as opposed to rented comes from the income of the purchaser. And it says, as a principle, an LE principle, an owner or renter shouldn't be paying more than 30% of income for housing costs. And the way housing costs is defined differently for sales housing versus rental housing. There are different elements, but what comes out is don't pay more than 30% of your gross income for housing.
This is mortgage, insurance, all that.
That's correct. principal, interest, taxes, insurance,
And utilities are not
plus
included in that?
utilities.
Do we have that, that you have on that?
The utilities that
It's
are
not what
generally
we're
accepted are heat
We're
and
not,
light.
we're not looking at what he's showing.
But we're not talking about internet or telephone or
No, we're not.
garbage or
No,
those are.
It's just the basic utilities associated
Where's your
with,
second one?
I'm just thinking that garbage, to me, is the basic utility. I mean, what are you gonna do with it? You own your house, what are you doing with your garbage? I mean, it should be calculated in.
well, you can go down that path as far as you want. All this does is it takes a definition that's accepted generally in the affordable housing world and specifically in that world in Vermont. So the Champlain Housing Trust, for example, or the state of Vermont with the agency that distributes money for housing doesn't consider the cost of garbage pickup as it computes that. Anyway, but your point is taken.
Can I say, another thing that you did on that memo is to give it some real numbers in terms of 2018 income figures. And I think that's useful just to say, you know, what is it we're actually talking about?
That's right.
Could you just,
Yeah, but it's, you know, what is the population that's being served here is,
Right.
would be the question. With sales housing in the state of Vermont and also in the town of Charlotte heretofore, it's 100% of median for sales housing and 80% of median for rental housing. That's the population. That's the maximum population that would be served and defined as the target for affordable housing.
And how is that adjusted as the years go on?
How is it adjusted?
Yeah.
It's produced annually by the federal government based on a lot of data collection. So those are numbers that are imposed upon every community in the country.
Well, they actually look at what the median household income is for the Burlington metropolitan area.
No, it's not arbitrary. There is a lot of calculation and a lot of data points that are brought into that calculation. And they're updated annually. They come out in spring, usually.
And we're gonna use that, and I noticed in the paperwork, it said that the median income for Shallotters was higher. So,
So we don't use the Charlotte number, we use the Chittenden County number,
okay.
basically.
But the Charlotte number is one number, that's 93,000, or the median income, but then is varied by family size, so which carries?
No, I think the 93,000 is Burlington number,
That's correct.
which includes
But then-
Charlotte.
So
That's
if we're
right.
looking at spending 30% of that gross on your housing, that means you're spending $2,500 a month. Right? Am I doing that math?
That's a pretty fast math.
If it's,
What was your base number to use?
Roughly a third of 93,000 is 30,000
I see.
a year, divided by 12, is $2,500 a month. So if you can buy a house and your mortgage is $2,500 or less,
Well, mortgage, utilities, everything, right? Taxes.
Yes.
yes.
So really, the mortgage would be like a little under
what, 17?
2,000, yeah.
And what does that get in terms of a house? A loan? I guess it depends on how much you put down.
The interest
That's
rate and
right.
a lot of other things.
See, that's where you start getting down a rabbit hole, because it really is, it's very individually defined if you play it out. What is affordable housing? How much does it cost to create a unit of affordable housing? Well, it depends somewhat how much down payment I got, what the interest rate is, there's a lot, there are moving parts within that.
And a reason to stick to this normative definition that's in your ordinance and it's in this policy is that's, as Peter mentioned, what the nonprofits and the other actors and the agencies out there that are involved in this are also looking at. So it'll be an apples to apples comparison. They won't have to do the special Charlotte adjustment. It'll all flow better. Not to say you shouldn't do it, but that's a downside of getting creative.
Right, and it shouldn't matter how much you put down, I don't think. I mean, I think the whether it's affordable or not should be calculated by how much the property is, plus the utilities and stuff. And then that would bring you down. How much somebody can put down on the property shouldn't make a difference, to me, in order to make it affordable. I mean, if somebody can put down $25,000, does that mean they can buy a house, an affordable house is $25,000 more?
I think the point that you're making is a point that the industry struggles with, and it very much derives from how much your down payment capacity is. Because if you got 25 grand,
Say it's zero, so you got two people
that's right,
that are applying for this particular house.
that's right.
And one person has $25,000 to put down, one person does not.
Right.
Is it an affordable place?
It's affordable. The one with the 25,000 down payment can buy a more expensive house than the one without.
I don't,
And still qualify as it being an affordable house.
Because
Break it down into the future value of that down payment. Convert that into, if I wasn't using it as a down payment and I had it in some fund and was making 5%,
Right. Well, didn't
you could try to shuffle stuff around.
Nancy bring up, and that we might be going a little tangential, but I think Nancy brought up that one of the mechanisms that one of the nonprofits uses is to create a revolving down payment system to help people's
that's right.
fixed income get to get the opportunity to buy affordable housing, where it wouldn't have been had they not had access to a down payment. And that's one way in which a nonprofit can actually create
Is that
affordable
kind of
housing.
how Habitat works, or?
I think it was a Burlington, was it Champlain Housing Trust?
There are a lot of examples of down payment assistance programs. How do you generate enough momentum to assemble a down payment? How you get financing for only 3% or 1% down versus the convention, which is 20% down. So down payment is the plug number that drives a lot of this stuff. And the point that you're making, Frank, is a very good one. It seems like the tail is wagging the dog if it's all about the down payment, and it's true. Rather than the value or the cost of creating the house.
correct. To me, it just makes this whole thing kind of askew when you have several people on this, I'm assuming on this list of people that can get affordable housing, and you're gonna be going down through it and saying, okay, this affordable house, if we're gonna say that that an affordable place is $300,000, because the payment's gonna be so much, nothing down, or so much down, however it works out. Why isn't that the line? It isn't, because if I got 25,000, I can get a $325,000 home. And that doesn't, to me, that doesn't sound right.
And the other thing is that if the interest rate is 3% versus 5%, you can afford a house that costs more. So it moves, the numbers move around. This is why the Vermont Housing Finance Agency is in the business of getting a source of mortgage money together that's cheaper than Chittenden Bank or whoever it is. Anyway, so that's another one of those levers that moves and creates the flutter in the value of the affordable house.
I was just trying to find a number that agreed with the numbers on our paper that says that if a person makes this much money for one family, they can afford a house so much, but they could afford a more expensive house or because they have some money to put down or the interest rate's different.
Yeah, that's not on this piece of paper. What's on this piece of paper is the rent of rental housing is much more stable because all you're doing is trying to get the rent to be affordable.
True.
And you're not dealing with what the value of the real estate is.
Well, yeah, but the owner may or may not. I mean, what happens when this rental unit goes up by $100 a month, and it gets out of the range of the person. I mean, is this, the way this thing is, I mean, that's another thing with this policy, with the, be able to buy out, or, they had penalties if you did buy out, or I just as soon have it so that you can't buy out. If you're in this, I figure you're in this for the long haul. There is no get out of it.
One of the things that came up in that, just to that point, is that encumbering that property for 1,000 years? Because then someone has to decide if they pass it down, you know, in 2018, if their estate is gonna pass that down to their kids in 2070, are they gonna make a decision today to take $5,000 to get some affordable housing rental and then have that encumbrance on their children's children and their children's children? So the back out was kind of a long-term thought, not a short-term one. So that down the road, it's not a forever commitment for a very small amount of money.
Well, why wouldn't it be?
Why wouldn't it be?
For everything. I mean, we have this land out here conserved forever. Why?
Well, I think what we've seen, what we think we've seen is that perpetual affordability component has been one of the things that's kept people from participating in the program at all. So we're not getting in, we think we're not getting as many grant applications because people look at that and go, you're offering us $10,000 to encumber our place forever, or we pay a 25% penalty if we decide to back out within 3 years. Shit, I'll just go get a home equity loan for $10,000. So if we want the program to appeal to those kinds of folks, our suggestion is you think about fiddling with that perpetual affordability aspect of it.
The other.
And we were talking about the amount too.
That's right, and we are also recommending that you increase the amount of available grants for construction.
But the other difference in equity is that when conservation happens, other monies are being leveraged to create a retail value during that day that come from
Farming.
Vermont Housing Trust. No, there's actual grant money that's coming in to pay to conserve it, whereas this is encumbering it without creating any retail value reimbursement to the person making that commitment.
Well, if you look at our program as a standalone and the only source of funds, I think that's true. But remember that the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board is a housing and conservation board. So Kate can tell you that there's plenty of grant money out there for affordable housing programs, and we could leverage some of that with a more active and a more a program that people are participating in more. And that's.
So you're recommending a bigger contribution and if it, at the least, a term buyout.
Well, your current policy has, you can get out of the policy now, you just pay
Right.
a hefty penalty. So our recommendation is to eliminate the penalties. As a starting point to tee up this exact conversation.
And
Maybe not where you end up, but if you were to just simply eliminate the penalties, people would.
You can buy back the $10,000.
Yeah.
But again, so there'd be nothing lost to the town, one, because the money would come back. Two, it would be an experiment and see if it increases the demand for the program. And then C, the people deciding on awarding the grants, which currently would be the Selectboard, doesn't have to say yes to any of the applications if they seem risky or like it's just gonna be a short-term borrowing scheme. So it leaves the kind of the flexibility in the awarding of the grants, but it opens the program up to be more flexible to try and get more demand for it. That doesn't mean that it's an automatic approval either. It's kind of at the discretion of the board.
Okay, so you've defined both rental and,
I know when Frank's mind's not been changed. It has not been changed.
you know, we don't have the same thing you have up there, just for the record. We don't have that second,
You don't have the second table?
yeah.
No.
I'd like to have that.
One page.
Let me, is there a second, this was an earlier one, sorry.
Which
You
is
have a
our,
newer one up there, Dean. What was printed?
well,
It's the earlier draft.
which is newer?
It looks like Dean's has
Dean's
a
is
little
newer.
more data
I'm
on
gonna
it.
run some copies of that.
It, sorry for the confusion.
So on rental, you said it's not as much of a moving target because you're not dealing with down payment, interest rates, paying the rental fee,
The math is simpler.
right?
Sorry about that.
Is the landlord gonna be tied into a certain number?
Pardon?
Is the landlord gonna be tied into a certain number?
Yeah, what it says is, the deal that a landlord is making is to offer the unit for rent not to exceed a calculated number.
And that calculated number is
It's
based on the applicant?
well, it's based,
Based on the renter?
here, yes and no. It starts out by saying, the maximum rent that you can charge for this two-bedroom unit is 30% of 80% of median income for this family size. So that's your ceiling. Now, I come along, and I'm not exactly at 80%, I'm at 75% of median. So the rent that I pay is based on the calculation of my ability to afford the rent. So there really are two knives here that would cut. There's a ceiling that's established, and then there is a rent that the individual tenant pays no more than based on the family income.
And and who pays the difference?
Well, the property owner can decide whether they want to rent it at a lower
That's right.
amount of money,
That's right.
Or look for a different renter.
right?
So if a landlord is part of this program
Yeah.
and he goes to rent it out, is there a time frame that he has to rent it out at a lower income?
Is there a time frame at the lower, you mean at the lower rent?
Forever, if it's your program.
If-
What's that?
Forever, if it's your program.
But it could be, I think what the
Do
question is.
you
it
mean a
could be
lease
un-
term, or what do you mean?
It could stay unrented for 3 years because he's not finding the right fit, is the question? Is that what you're asking?
Well,
Or does he have to rent it?
that and if he has to rent it for the lower income, I mean, if we do it as the policy is, where you can go with a buyout and this and that, if they build it with funds from this program, they're required to rent it for as affordable
As that-
for the term. And then after that term, they could, with the one we have here, they could opt out.
No, I don't think so. Not.
You can change the
What
rent.
would change is when the next set of median
Right.
income figures come out from HUD, and assuming that the median income goes up, then the maximum rent
Plus,
could go up at that point,
if they're at 75%,
right?
the next party, the owner of the property could charge the 80% factor. So the rent per se is not fixed.
Are you talking about the penalty terms?
Well,
As
yeah,
the term?
well, at this point, we have the penalty terms. I'm just saying if they did the, I mean, if they used the program to establish the rental unit, rented it to somebody low income because it's required, and then they, over the time that is required, they decide to buy out and say, okay, I don't want to do it for low income anymore.
Yeah, and on the penalty side, that requirement is.
I'm just trying to figure out I'm just trying to find out the perpetual affordability thing.
Perpetual
just-
also has a problem with taxes, because if you value of your house, your rental goes up, your taxes are gonna go up even though you pay, what, it's 65% if it's a registered housing. But it didn't go up and your rent's gonna stay the same, and you're gonna end up like in California where people were, that there's no, I didn't see anything in our rules about changing with tax values. So if for some reason Charlotte becomes the hot place in the nation and the tax and the value of this low-income housing doubles over 10 years and you're stuck with this tiny rate because your taxes are gonna prevent you from doing anything with it.
Well, that's where,
What you slip into very quickly when you're wrestling with the issues that you're highlighting is the need for rental assistance in order to provide some stability of affordability for the lower income tenant. So what the rental assistance does, what Section 8 does, I don't know, most people probably heard of that, it says, we're going to make sure that you've got enough buying power here with only 30% of your income to be able to rent a standard unit, because we're going to provide a rent subsidy to chase that number. So the taxes go up, other things go up, the utilities go up, you're protected. And it's a difficult task to create a rental program without rental assistance that's going to serve a consistent
So it's not
band
affordable.
of lower income tenants.
Once you get to where you're getting rental assistance, that changes the whole thing. It's not affordable then, because you're changing it to assisted, you're getting assistance, Section 8 or something like that. I mean, then the people could go out and get a regular place, we'll call it. That's not affordable, and I mean, what this is helping is this would help the rental assistants pay less.
No, what the rental assistance program does is it says, it does the same calculation that is conducted on this piece of paper. It says, here is the maximum rent. And the difference between the maximum rent that's calculated based on HUD rules or whoever's rules and the affordability of the tenant is covered by a rental subsidy. So the tenant is still paying, but you still have a ceiling. So you can't go out and rent a $2,000 a month luxury unit. You're going to be constrained to rent only a $1,500 a month or a $1,200.
Right, but that person that's in that place may not pay any rent at all.
May not be what?
May not pay any rent at all. Section 8 may pay the whole thing.
Oh, it can, yes, it can. It can get down to a nominal
Get
rental
down to zero.
payment, like $25 a month.
No, it can get down to zero.
Yeah,
Been there, done that.
not anymore. Those are the old days. And they're trying to push it up now.
What happens if a household starts making more money, but, so he's $50,000, got him in there, got her in there, and now 3 years later, got promotions, now we're at $75,000 income. Love it in Charlotte, want to keep staying, so then, keep going.
It's a really great question. And that can happen.
Oh,
That can
sure.
play out in real time.
Yes.
I mean, what are you going to do, displace somebody because they got too rich?
Right. But it's interesting.
Right.
Like,
I mean, what tends to happen, in my experience, is that that tenant will aspire to a bigger, better unit. Not always.
I was gonna say, not if they're living in a great place in Charlotte, it'd be pretty, very possible that.
Yeah, but maybe they're going to want something a little bit bigger.
So should we move on? So we got an appreciation. It's
Good.
That's some basis?
pretty variable, but I understand.
It's a squishy topic, obviously.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of variables and a lot of things we could chat about.
Where are you gonna put all these affordable houses? Or units?
Well, that's one question I have is what's our target?
Yeah.
How many do we need? I mean, you can check that with as we were talking earlier with homes that are purchased, but rental units, I mean, how do you track that in town?
And I
without-
hear there's a lot of them.
Well, you
More
know,
than we
everybody's,
even
there's an
know.
apartment over somebody's garage, is that reported as affordable, or it's no, because I'm swapping rent for mowing the lawn, you know, how does that work out? I can see it being easier to evaluate the purchase houses, because you can get hard data from taxes. But the rental, we don't have any way of inventorying or tracking that. So then you say, well, we need more. Well, we haven't established a number, which, you know, when I need a target. 10%? Is there a standard that towns are supposed to have? What does the state say?
I don't think it's a state, I think it's the Regional Planning Commission sets out periodic target new housing units for the whole county and then allocates a certain amount to each town.
And they
Right.
did come and,
They backed away from that. I think they did that about 10 years ago, and then they found some pushback, and I think they're basically saying the whole county now, and they're not specifying each town has to have a certain amount.
but the whole county was a lot. The last presentation a few months back was like 3,500 homes, 3,500 housing units need to be created.
Of all types?
Chittenden County. No, I don't think it broke out. It was kind of a gross
Right, but that's not
presentation.
3,500 affordable housing units or
No.
moderately priced housing, it was just, we need 3,500 more homes.
Chittenden County.
In Chittenden
Oh,
County.
nothing to do with affordable housing?
No,
Just growth and.
yeah.
Okay, so.
But 10% of those should be affordable, whatever percent.
So we certainly don't have that answer for you.
When you, Kate, when you apply for the grants through the state for stuff, do they have anything like, you know, you have affordable housing, does your town have 10%? Is there a number they look
You
at?
mean what, VHCV?
Yeah,
You mean when we apply for conservation grants?
yeah.
They usually ask us what Charlotte's done lately for affordable housing.
So
And
they-
at one point, there was a moratorium on grants to Charlotte until we did more for affordable housing.
But
And
they
we
don't-
danced around that a bit, so.
They don't have
It
targets.
was not a target, no,
Okay.
or it was not a specific number, and it was looking at more than just the units. It was also considering the zoning regulations and other factors. And having this fund actually did help us. When going in for applications, we could point out that the town had done something. So it was not a specific
Okay.
numeric target. It was a broader array of things that they hoped we would do.
So it sounds like you'd like to figure out how many units we have and how many units we need so that you can figure out a delta that would be a target to fill, kind of.
Some way to numerically establish the need. I mean, if it's accepted nationwide or whatever groups of authorities say, you know, 10% of your housing should be affordable. Well, then we can go through the numbers and say, yes, they are, no, we don't, you know.
I certainly don't know, does such a number exist?
There was a study of affordable housing needs that the town of Charlotte did in 2006. And it received a grant through the state in order to produce this. It's a little outdated now, but it sought to generate exactly the kind of answer that you do to the question you just raised. And I don't remember exactly what's in this. A 10% target is a good, healthy target. And anyway,
So we paid to have that study done, or we're given a grant to have that study done?
yeah,
So that must have been what got memorialized in the town plan that year.
it did.
Okay, yeah, so that was like, I can't remember the number.
I guess we did hire somebody, and he basically, the approach he took was a market analysis perhaps more than a needs analysis. So he basically used what is the demand based on some assumptions. For example, assumption that someone in their 60s who's never owned a house is not going to want to buy a house. So, you know, I think there was some good information in there, but it's also based on some assumptions that may need to be evaluated.
Well, that's part of my concern is, I mean, there aren't that many jobs in this town that people would need low or affordable housing for? I mean, it's a much more bigger number in a place like Burlington, and then do you assume that they're going, I mean, the simple explanation is a farmer builds a house for labor, because he needs something close. The labor can't afford to commute from here to Burlington, so they build it on the site. Does the farther you get from a large concentration of jobs require the more affordable or less affordable housing? To me, it would be less, because, I mean, why would you want someone who has to now drive 20 minutes every day and have a reliable car for their job, as opposed to where they could, in a more suburban area, get on a bus and go to their job?
Well, I think
Another monthly expense, basically.
Yeah, you know, if I'm counting my pennies and my job's in Colchester, I'm looking around there. I'm not looking 20 miles away out in the country. It'd be nice, but then I gotta have a car, what if the sitter's not there? And there's so many variables here, I having a hard time. I'm black and white, so I'm having a hard time nailing this down.
Well, one of the things that I saw a couple examples of, and a friend of mine, you know, built an accessory dwelling on the property that he grew up on. And if there was access to a grant like this, it would have significantly helped, because it's only an 1,100 square foot dwelling. I think there's a lot of properties in Charlotte that have taken 2-3 years on the market not selling, that if they had a $2,500 a month income rental, which was still in the affordable housing allotment, they could put $100,000, $120,000 into renovating a 3-car detached garage, get a 1,200 square foot apartment up there, and at $30,000 a year, the payback on that's like 4 years. With a little help from this program, it might also help the fluidity of the market, create some income if people are spending time as snowbirds, but they still want to retain a property in Charlotte. I think there's a demographic in town that doesn't want to leave, but also doesn't have the same saleable housing that they thought they had 20 years ago, and are kind of, this is another possible demand that would have entrance into this program, is, you know, to get a $10,000 or $20,000 kind of contribution or grant that would then be a commitment to having affordable rental housing increase. And it would also, you know, reduce the burden of the subdivision pressures in town.
I agree, but I think the amount they can get from this is so small. It's
Yeah.
enough to do a bathroom.
which is why we think you should look at that differently. Let me just give you another copy of the current town plan chapter on housing and demographics. I think I've given this to you before.
I saw statistically we're given from regional planning that by the year 2050, we would have about 4,800 people living in Charlotte by 2050.
Up from 3,600.
38, about 1,000 more people over the next 20, 30 years.
I think that's consistent with this 8.1% growth rate that's embedded in the plan annual. Yeah. So I'm just giving you this, Fritz, because the Planning Commission's wrestled with this question of what we should be aiming for in terms of housing, not from the black and white, perfect legitimate approach that you're taking, but in broad terms, the third planning consideration is, at least based on the town plan that was just adopted, broad diversity in housing will continue to be necessary to support the required tax base and to keep Charlotte financially sound. Now, I guess from our perspective, taking issue with that key planning consideration is not where we are now. This is the policy of the town.
That's what
But this is.
this lacks.
This is the current town plan.
So why aren't we reappointing members to an affordable housing committee?
Because the people who are likely to accept that appointment want you guys to do some work in thinking about this policy before we commit to doing that.
I thought of that on the way here.
And that's
I think that's a good
completely
idea.
transparent,
We should
otherwise,
definitely do.
you know, you're gonna send us out and say, go do something, we're gonna say, what do you want us to do? So we'd like to know what that is before I'm speaking hypothetically.
Yeah, and have some applicants,
Right.
and have some applications,
Yeah.
trying to make it a more attractive program.
I didn't think it was attractive the day it was, wasn't even really signed. Nobody signed it,
What do you mean?
back in 2011, at least the copy I got, there's
Well, that
no
was
select board numbers.
That was a word version that's floating around for editing purposes.
Oh, okay, thank you.
There are in
I was
fact
like-
5 signatures on that document.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just didn't, yeah, I didn't like it back then, and so
So
I don't
I don't mean to stick your face into another piece of paper, but I think the answer to your question is, it would be great to have really hard data and know exactly what we need, and we don't have the money or time, or we don't have the money to figure that out. But I think the town has spoken that housing diversity continues to be a legitimate goal, and that that's what this policy should be aimed at.
Well, there has to be some way to measure that. I mean, this is the nice ethereal document, but it doesn't say where we started.
How do other towns or cities track rental? Is it done through their listers?
I think listers pay attention to things like that.
I mean-
You might know from Shelburne.
You can,
Yeah.
you can get
I
from,
thought for a while, the listers could do us a great service by gathering data on what are the small businesses in town? How many little farms really are there? Who's doing what where in town, including how many rental apartments are there?
that's not in their scope of work, but the purchase stuff is. I mean, they can print you, this is a printout of houses that are under $260,000. And it's 136 houses in town. And 18 of those houses have covenants, rental covenants on them, which means they only pay 16% or 65% of their purchase value. So to have those 16 affordable houses increases the tax burden on everybody else, $14,000 a year. These are some of the numbers that
$14,000 in aggregate?
a year in taxes are discounted to the
Per-
list
Per
of,
household?
to the list
Per
of
total.
18 covenant houses. I mean, it tells you how much they're valued at, then it tells you they only pay 65% of that. So when you do the math, that works out to be about $14,000 a year total in taxes are not paid because 18 of the houses have a covenant. So one thing they don't mention is the reoccurring expense to the taxpayer to support this program annually for a true affordable housing that has a covenant on it, which all of the, like Champlain housing places and stuff, they all apply for that.
Right.
So there is information out there. All I had to do was ask the lister, and I had it the next day. We came up with all of this stuff, and no one even bothered. So I'm not quite sure how that goes, but anyway, there is numbers available, and somebody,
So what's the covenant mean? Does that
the
mean
covenant means
it's a rule, a regulation that's affordable, or how do
There's-
they justify?
it's a state thing. It's state, you've had to comply, I think it's a state thing. You just stepped a little bit past my knowledge here. But I think it's a state program that says when you list your house as affordable housing, or it has a rental covenant, which I suppose
Well,
this
how many of
covers,
those are through this program? At least,
probably none.
well,
Are we talking about the house like
no, probably
Harvard's Way,
eight.
No.
Greenbush Road?
bet you
Three,
not.
or
No, bet you not.
the ones,
Well, I'll tell you what,
Random
I'll tell you what,
houses.
if you share that information with me, I'll look at it, I'll see if I can make sense of that in the
Yeah.
context of what we're talking about
Yeah.
what we're recommending.
Yeah, well, I was trying to get to the numbers that I'm saying, that I'm asking for, so I could get there I couldn't get there, but I could see where you could with owned houses. Rental houses is another, I mean, a lot of people don't want to know that they're renting their barn to somebody, or their garage to somebody for cheap, because they probably don't have the permits to do it. I mean, I can count the number of those I know of on at least one hand. And it's low-income housing, but it's just under the table housing. And if you start calling them from the town and saying, I need to know if you're renting that garage, they say, well, I'm not doing that.
So, under this contention, is that another way of saying we might already have a affordable housing program through the state and this covenant that you're referring to?
Well-
That gives them a discount in their taxes?
If I could figure out how many houses, what level of a house is affordable, I can look at the inventory and say that we have 200 of those, or 150 that are out of a total number, and I can say, well, blank percentage of our house are classified as affordable to purchase. Rental's tougher. And then I would suspect that probably some people don't even know that they can register for, I don't know the rules to getting into the covenant.
I
But-
think the covenant's probably when an organization like Champlain Housing Trust or Habitat has a covenant on the property, there may be a tax abatement.
Yeah, they pay
Provision.
65% of their value. It's a cheaper
But-
deal.
So, as far as this list goes, I forget, how many did you say is on the
I think
list?
there was 18.
They
Betsy
have
generated
the
that
covenant,
for
but
me.
how many are valued under 260,000?
136, if I can count right, which is
Below
questionable.
200.
Yeah, that's what you said before.
Yeah, I just added them up per page. That's just documents from the, I don't think that's private information.
No,
I hope it's,
No, it's not. But that could happen.
yeah.
Just leave it with the lister.
So who's paying those taxes, Fritz? This pays 65 of
Well,
the,
everybody else is.
the rest of the taxpayer just gets flowed to the
So
rest of
that's
the taxpayer.
one thing that I think needs to be clear is that when this happens, that everybody picks up a share.
It's also saying we're supporting affordable housing,
Every year.
depending on the definition.
Every year we do.
This is definitely one of the habitat houses, I recognize.
The names. It's probably the organizations that have the wherewithal to apply for that.
Yes, Christina.
So for instance, the Champlain Housing Trust covenants that actually applies to the homes, when they sign up for the covenants is like 11 pages long, and it basically dictates to the soon-to-be owner what they can do. It also dictates to them that they cannot sell it for a profit. So it has to stay affordable, so that's part of the covenants. It's restricting, even if they did $20,000 worth of improvements or $30,000 worth of improvements, and they wanted to sell it a year later, they have to sell it for what they paid for it. That's part of the covenants on Champlain Housing Trust. There is no profit to be made when they buy and sell a home. So that covenant restricts when they sell and when they
You
purchase
can
also.
make just a little bit, a certain amount,
Share.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true, Christina, that there's a limitation on how much of the profit from the
It's
sale you
minimal,
can
but-
Yes,
pocket.
it's extremely minimal.
Well, because
But
the
so-
idea would be for them to take that money to their next house.
Right.
Right.
So,
So it's extremely minimal that they can
Right.
allow for a profit. And they spell it all out based on the home. Every Champlain Housing Trust covenants has a different value that's put into the covenants depending on the home that it is.
So if they sign up, if a potential buyer signs that covenant, then that gives them this 35% reduction in taxes, which automatically flows to the taxpayers of the town?
yeah.
Goes to their tax bill.
And that's something that the state is
Well, the way that it
authorizing?
happens is though it happens through the value. Like Fritz said, here's the value that they have, and then they give it a lower reduced value. So it's not like you say to the taxpayers, these people are supposed to pay $10,000 and they're only paying $3,000, so you guys gotta pick up the other $7,000. It all works out in the
Oh, the
value.
So the
of the
listers
home.
can only assess it at 65% of whatever
Yes.
the
Right.
comp
It's
value
it
is.
sounds like funny math.
So it works the same way as the conserved land then?
Yes.
Very similar. There's a different value.
Different value for the conserved land.
There's not very much room, I don't think. But we always tell people, don't conserve land to save on your property taxes. That's not the way it works.
Well, I'm not saying there's
No.
a big
The
difference,
housing
but
is
there
different,
is
all I'm
some.
saying is that you can't, it's not a comparison between the way conserved land is taxed and affordable housing is taxed.
I think he was talking about use value appraisals.
Oh,
Land
use
use.
value appraisal is
Yeah.
different. Now, that's
Yeah.
different.
Current use, yeah.
That current use is not the same as conserved land.
So,
But, yeah,
so we have just 5 more minutes of your
Right.
time, and
I'd like to ask somebody to make a motion to adopt his recommendation for May 29th, if you don't have it. So we can at least have some deliberation
Do you want to just,
on those.
to make a motion to adopt them and then we discuss them, is that what you're kind of saying?
Yeah.
To adopt them or accept them?
Or accept.
Endorse
I don't know
them.
if I wanna.
Say they're good.
Do you want to go through them just quickly?
I'll make a motion to accept the summary of recommendations from the Affordable Housing Ad Hoc Working Group from May 29th, 2018.
Is that seconded?
Sure.
So this is the separate piece, this is the May 29th, the separate piece of paper, overall recommendations.
Yeah, this is just an extraction from the report, the 5 or 6 page report that you received previously.
And now we can discuss it.
Okay, discussion. So number one, we just go down them, is that what we're gonna do? Flexibility? Make it more user-friendly and flexible?
Yeah, we think making it more flexible will increase people's willingness and interest in getting involved. We've talked a lot about number 2 already.
Right?
Number 3 asks you to consider expanding the target somewhat from purely affordable based on these demographic definitions to considering senior housing and workforce housing as appropriate targets for the program. So that gets you.
We're gonna make this affordable definition, and that's gonna be recommended to the planning commission to adjust their zoning bylaws.
Which affordable definition?
The one that's in our zoning bylaws. Because this, according to our zoning bylaws, it says it's gonna require for a minimum period of 99 years from the date of first sale or lease.
So that's the perpetual part of it.
Right.
Yeah. We're going to recommend that you allow some of this grant money to flow to projects that are affordable but not perpetually affordable.
Gotcha.
Okay.
And then the 4th general recommendation is, as Fritz has discovered, some of the existing affordable housing in town, and a lot of the grants were awarded to nonprofits like Champlain Housing Trust, and that if that's where the successes are, maybe we should tweak the program to encourage more of more participation from those groups that have successfully used the grant program today.
So these are general in nature, in principle, before we get into the details.
Yeah.
Kind of a starting place.
Yeah, I think it'd be helpful to deliberate a little bit on those 4 broad objectives.
Yeah, I need some method to interview or approve of the nonprofit developer. Some of those, I mean, I haven't heard of any specifically around here, but where I came from, there are some that are come in, read the rules, hire the attorneys, demand the rights, and then all of a sudden, stuff happens that you've lost control of because you agreed to have them show up in town.
I mean, one thing to remember is any project that comes in has to go through the planning commission permitting process as any other project would.
Sure. Oh, that's like grants, I always have to want to know what the strings are before I agree to one.
Well, an accessory apartment wouldn't have to go through the planning commission.
Correct, right. I was thinking, Fritz was thinking, had in mind bigger projects than single accessory.
So our motion is to look at the overall recommendations, 1 through 4. So the ones below that is it premature to decide?
Oh, I think I said the summary of recommendations. I just read the title of the document.
Yeah.
But the other items are going to take more discussion. The size of the grants.
I think what we'd be eager to do, if the consensus is, or there's actual action to embrace these overall recommendations, is to get busy to flush out these specifics. Because there still is some fluidity there, but we didn't want to get into that if we're out too far on the limb.
kind of think we've been tasked that by the last town meeting and the voters.
Yeah, I think, being at the meetings, there was a hesitancy to like go too far into the mechanics of something if it didn't seem palatable to the select board. So that it kind of came to consensus on some broader definitions, some broader problems with the existing program or policy, and then make this presentation where they could say, you know, the committee could say, the working group could say, is this the right direction you want us to kind of knead out the details of, or should we be working on 5 and 6 that aren't on here?
I can appreciate Mike not wanting to do a lot of work and then somebody say, no, I don't like it, start over.
All of that, it happens all the time.
I know.
But normally I get charged for it. Right? That's what you're thinking.
So
Yeah, how can I charge for this?
Christina, your comment to this motion?
Actually, I have a question, only because Frank brought up the zoning bylaws. Before you guys go putting all this work into this document, are there maybe zoning bylaws and planning stuff that needs to be corrected first by definitions? Only because you guys could do this product and come up with this procedure or have different definitions than the actual laws of the town. So are there other things that need to be taken care of before you get too in-depth into adopting a policy that would be contradicted by the zoning bylaws?
That issue did come up in the committee, and I think the discussion basically coalesced around the fact that this policy exists, it's just not getting a lot of interest. Currently, the select board, if someone applied for this grant today, the select board would be the committee that reviews the application based on this policy and procedure, and could award or not award, and that is consistent with what we have today for land use rules and regs. But if we amended this and worked out some of these details, then that would probably be the next step, is getting recommendations on what changes to make so that there could be more consistency.
But before this would be finalized, I mean, we can go through the whole process, try to work out all the kinks, get it all done, and before we approve it for final, to make it be our policy, we could send it to the planning commission to make sure that it agrees with our zoning bylaws, and they would have to check and recommend any changes.
So these are recommendations right now in principle, and then as we flow through this, then it'll get compared to the plan or land use
To
regulations.
see if there's,
Right.
Yeah,
you
this
can't
is,
know
we're
that
not
until you
approving
do
an
it.
ordinance or
Approve it.
anything.
Hopefully get fleshed out in the process.
Right.
Has to go in front of the planning commission has to have 2 or 3
meetings.
hearings, and then it gets, once it's approved by the planning commission, it comes to the select board. The select board has their 2 or 3 meetings on it, and then usually it goes to the voters.
Same as the town plan that we just did.
Yep.
Same as the town plan.
And what we know is that this is consistent because the program has awarded grant monies, so it would really just be looking at the narrow scope of any changes. Does that trigger any inconsistencies?
Well, I think you're gonna find that this is more of a mechanism. Once they're approved for affordable housing through the planning commission, then this takes over to
Awards and grant money.
for awards for grants and the mechanisms to keep it affordable as long as they're within the program.
We think that the only rub that we've been able to identify is around this issue of perpetual affordability. And the application of that to existing property owners as opposed to nonprofits is where that rub is felt. And we think that the reason that it hasn't been more popular is because it's too time-bound and it's too much of an encumbrance because it's forever. And for 10 grand, that's not worth it. Therefore, there's really only one person, soon to be 2, in the 10 years since the program's been alive, that's even involved in it. The nonprofits are used to that. they're not frightened or concerned about perpetual
I think Dean
affordability.
had something to say about that before, about the town having to look at the income of the renters or something you were talking about before.
Tonight?
About the town having to do it, and right now the nonprofits are making sure that the people
Right, they
meet the
qualify.
qualifications,
Right.
and on certain things, they would have to bring stuff into the
True.
town to do it.
Yep.
Also,
Yeah.
one of, as we were, there was a period of the discussions that were really just free flow brainstorming. And one of my thoughts with the number one, flexibility, is, to create something flexible enough that someone could put in their application what they were willing to commit to, rather than having it be so stringent. So someone could say, listen, I want to create affordable housing for 30 years, and I need $20,000 to do that, and I'll commit to 30 years for this rental property. And if the town has $200,000 in the fund and only one applicant that year, maybe the town awards it. If there's 10 other applicants and they all say they want $10,000 and they're willing to commit 100 years, well, maybe that application doesn't get awarded. But the idea is really to have it be more flexible so that there can be more interest in the program, and let the committee, or currently the de facto committee is the select board, then decide to award the money or not based on its merits and how many applications there are. But getting no applications every year didn't seem beneficial, and I think that's what
People
got this
really know
going.
about it? Does a lot of people, does everyone in Charlotte know that? Yeah.
So let's call the
Haven't heard it.
question. Let's vote on this. These are just overall recommendations. That gives you guys some direction. We'll meet again in 2 weeks. And then what's next for us to discuss the items below? Okay. Are people prepared to vote? Okay. All in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'm just opposing, just because I'm not familiar enough with it, I'm not ready to,
Okay.
I'm there for you, but, I'll abstain, yes, please.
Can you
Thank you.
give me copies, make copies of those?
Okay.
Yeah, those 2
I'd
sheets.
like to have copies of that too. Please.
Just,
The materials that Chris gave you, I'll run them, so 2 copies?
Oh, I'd like to see them, so maybe Dean can put them in our mailbox.
My copy rate's really low.
Okay. Thank you for coming in. Good discussion. It's gonna take a bit for us all to grab hold.
This isn't easy stuff.
Yeah, I mean, just listening to the qualifications.
I remember when it first got started, it was like, where do you start?
I know, I mean, it's just so
Show my
flexible.
age, am I?
I just gonna have a contractor come in and like shovel and,
Was that Carter Day? Is that when it all-
yeah, got all this lined out here, this LaBeouf one. Okay, are there any adjustments to the agenda, Dean?
Not that I'm aware of.
So you have not passed out minutes, but if there's time, we could look at those
They
at
were
the end.
provided by Kath, and I do have them. I just,
Okay.
it wasn't.
We'll just see how the meeting
Yep.
goes. Are there any updates? One of the things you and I talked, Dean, is about the water testing. Do you want
Right.
to say something about that? We deferred going out to a contractor, see if somebody within the town office could do it.
The town hall and library system requires a Class 3 operator, which requires basically someone who's practiced for a year and a half and has a supervisor that's able to confirm that they're able to do the work. So it's not something that somebody can just register for, like the Class 1. So I talked a little bit with Christina, and I think we both,
I indicated the date after the meeting. Someone contacted me and answered all the questions that I had. And then I did my own perusing on the state website, and yes, it's quite an education. It's all right there. You guys could find any information out about it whatsoever, but Dean stated it perfectly. We're a Class 3. Class 3 involves a whole lot of training.
Okay, we were in a position to vote on this, and you brought up that
Ask
question.
all those questions.
And so you had a spreadsheet and we were to vote, do you have that with, I mean, we
I
could.
do, yeah. Lincoln Applied Geology was the lowest bidder for the town hall and library systems at $541.50 each per year, for 1 year.
And they're actually the current operator.
And they're the current, right?
They're the current operator.
Is it in proper protocol to have that motion now? We discussed it for 3 meetings. And we just delayed to answer these questions. Is there a motion to approve Lincoln Applied Laboratory to do our water testing? And what are the locations?
Town hall and library.
Is there a motion for that?
Sure, I'll make a motion to approve Lincoln Applied Geology to do the water testing for the town hall and the town library.
Okay.
For a, what is it, 1-year contract, right? Starting
July.
probably, July 1, okay. We're not late.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion on that? All in favor, say aye.
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 Hey, we got, get that approved. That's been around. Any other updates? Okay, we're 3 minutes early for Sherlock Park and Wildlife Habitat Management Plan. Are you, it's okay?
We're like that, we like that.
You like to be ahead of
How
schedule?
often does that happen for us? Shall we come up?
Sure, and kind of guide us what you've got. We're a little bit spoiled, we get to look at track changes, and you have a different system, so you have to guide us what has changed.
They're my nemesis, those
Oh,
Way beyond track changes.
We're
oh, way
beyond.
beyond it, huh?
Okay, do you have copies of what I'm gonna work on?
We have a handout.
Okay, so do you have the, I'm gonna be so bold as
That's
to
perfect.
share a desk with you.
That's
Because,
perfect.
and then I can lay it out. So the best way that I find to understand these changes is I kind of look at what we had and what we're changing, and then Jenny did this amazing little outline,
The summary of
the summary of the changes. So what I figured is I'd walk you through the changes, and then if you have questions about them, then you can ask me the questions, section by section.
So we're updating the management, when was the last time it was updated?
1999.
And is this a phase of an update, or?
Yes, remember, we're doing it in pieces, okay? Because it's a big document, so,
last year we did 2 sections?
yeah, we did the complicated ones. We did agriculture and the park pool review, okay? I have a copy, I didn't get one.
And the agriculture was complicated because that governs a lot of the lease
Right, all those.
requirements.
And
Letter.
that's been approved.
And
Yep.
that's the revenue stream
Yes.
to the towns.
So the first section we're addressing tonight is the landscape management plan and maintenance standards, okay? This plan was pretty short, as it said, and most of the original wording remains. We have,
Is the summary handout one that I should be looking at as you're
I
talking?
think it's the last one in the.
You're talking the last one?
okay, it looks like
Yes, it
this.
says D.
D like in Bravo?
Well, all right, so
D
this is
as
what
in
I have
David.
in front of, this is how I'm doing it, Lane. I have the section I'm talking about on top, and I have the summary of the changes next to it, and then I have the original document,
Okay.
which, you know, you don't really need unless you have a question, but I can reference back and
Okay, I
forth that
found
way.
D.
Okay. So do you have the summary of changes next to you, so you can read
And
along?
what's that piece of
No, I don't
paper?
think we received that.
Did you bring
I
the
have
copies?
2 copies, and I left them up there, but we can make more copies, so. it'll be right down.
I mean, is it easy?
This is the summary of changes?
Yeah, Jenny, oh, you don't have,
That's the summary
okay.
of changes?
All right, I thought everybody had that. All right, so I'm gonna start while she's doing it, but I need my summary.
Yep.
So I can tell you. Okay, so one of the things we tried to do this plan, just a little history, we tried to do this plan probably 5 years ago, and the formatting was so changed, it was hard to follow what we were adding and taking away and editing. So what we've
really tried to do is stick very much to the original document and how it was formatted. So basically, we've kept that. So this particular section was very short. I'll show you what it looked like before. It was this little piece and this little piece, okay? So we've expanded it to include two big changes of it are we've added invasive species and erosion control as separate sections, okay? So if you look through what you've got, you'll see the first one you come across that's really different is the invasive species. And then we put in erosion control. In the original document, it says implement a plan for invasive species and erosion control. So obviously since 1999, as you well know, because you've heard so much about invasive species and erosion, we have implemented a plan. So now we're putting it in the document to reflect the plan that we've implemented. Does that make sense?
Yep, can I back up one bit?
Yep.
The whole overall plan, the management plan, as we finish it, does that go before the voters? Or is it approved by the select board? I mean,
This document.
what's its ultimate purpose? I mean, it's to protect.
The document is governed just by the select board as far as its
Okay, it's
approval
our
process.
document.
Yep. And it's how, on behalf of the town, and
Right.
how the park, which is town-owned land,
Right.
can be more specifically maintained than other town lands.
And so do we have a hearing and that kind of thing like we did with other? Or is
We
it-
haven't. So last year, they showed the recommendations of the draft from the committee's drafting process.
Yeah.
And then the select board had time to weigh in on any changes that the select board wanted to see of the recommendations, and then voted to adopt an update to the existing plan.
So when these changes are done that we're going through now, is that 80% of the plan or 100% of the plan?
No, it's probably like another 20%.
Okay.
We'll have
Not
a little
even?
more ambitious tonight.
I just wanted to ask on that topic, how is the management plan related to the ordinance? Is it, they're two separate?
I believe the ordinance is as an exhibit within the plan. So the plan has an outline of how we should manage the piece of land. And the historical piece of that was that it was written prior to turning the land over to the town. And it was it's meant as a guide to how to manage it, because it's a unique piece of property. It covers wildlife, it covers agriculture, and it covers open space, and it covers recreation. So it was an idea of that. Within that document, the way that we dealt with it when we originally wrote the plan was to have these exhibits. And the idea of the exhibit was that they could respond without going through the process we're going through now. So an exhibit, for example, we had a big issue 10 years ago, or longer probably, because time flies, of dogs in the park. And we needed to have a consequence for people who had a dog. So we did an ordinance that showed about dogs. And we were able to insert that ordinance into the document without changing the whole document. So we've kind of been working, invasive species, we've had.
And the select board approved that.
Actually,
It didn't
Yeah.
go to the voters.
Yeah.
or-
talked to just a bit about the plan. I heard some questions and just want to make sure that there were a few things brought up. But as Jesse said, the original plan was in 1999, which was almost 20 years ago. So there have been a lot of changes. And actually, the ordinance was in the original plan. And there were quite a few exhibits in the original plan. And now we've added to the list of exhibits. The exhibits are now on the website, so you can take a look at them. In the document that we have right now, which is a draft, we haven't numbered them, and we've identified them but not numbered them. But in the final version of it, they'll have numbers. They may exist on the website and not in every copy of the plan, because we have quite a few documents to add to it. So anyway, and policy, procedure-wise, the group that created the park developed the initial plan. We've been working on making the changes. Each section is to be approved by the select board. And we also need to submit the plan to the Vermont Land Trust for their approval, so.
And then in the beginning of this iteration of updating the 99 edition, it seems like there was a big emphasis on the edits really focusing on adding in the management changes that are already happening, that have been happening on the ground based on the committee's decisions of how to best manage the land, but weren't being done in 99. So most of them aren't like new ideas, they're really putting into the document the practices that are happening and have been happening.
Should we put it on the front cover of this, revised, June 2017? In other words, we've approved that, it's chapters, whatever it is. Now today, July 2018, we don't want to lose sight of what we've done. And then as the years go by, you can say it was updated 2017, not the whole document, but a
these
portion.
I think that's an
Yeah.
excellent
And then
idea.
today, when we get done, or if we listen to it for maybe a week or, next meeting, then you have another update.
That's
So
an
that-
excellent
that
idea. I
brings
think
your-
that's really smart,
And then
Blaine. That's a
whoever
really,
else needs to look at the document, it isn't 20 years old anymore.
okay.
Yeah.
I like that idea a lot.
Okay.
Would you, if we did that, like, for example, on the tops of the page, it says management plan, June 99. Would you put revised on the specific plans that have been, sections that have been approved? Okay. I think that's a really
And
good
then in
idea.
the summary, just say last revision 2017, and then you can have another one, and you can
Yeah.
denote the pages.
Yeah, we're trying, it's very,
Otherwise, you'll never catch up. If it takes 5 years to do this, what you did 4 years ago won't be relevant, may not be. Yeah.
and the,
Finish it this year.
we're hoping to finish
Okay,
it this
perfect.
year. Life aside, we actually have gotten a lot done. I think you'll be really pleased with us. And, the thing is that it's a living document, as Matt said. We're already doing a lot of this stuff, but we tried to keep the historical stuff in because I think we all think it's important to how the land has evolved as we've had stewardship of it. Okay, so moving on with that, that is why we put in the 2 new sections in the landscape management plan, erosion control and invasive species.
Okay? Yep.
Okay? And then the other changes we made for that is just adding the exhibits in. So in the work plan, really, the work plan follows more what we've actually done, what we do.
So what's your source of expertise? I mean,
Well, for
invasive
example,
species,
well,
As
we
you're
have
working-
been, we worked with the University of Vermont Lands to develop a standard for wildlife refuge invasive species management plan,
I
which
see.
now becomes an exhibit. And then we have, and then in the work plan, we then say, follow that invasive management plan. And then in erosion control, we, the same thing, we went and we got the management suggestions for the agricultural fields and watershed of the brook. We made it an exhibit. We have the letter from the person who gave the recommendations, and we made that. And then in the work plan, we do it again, follow the Headwaters Guidelines exhibit. So the plan, the general sort of tells what our work plan tells how to implement what's in the general section. Does that make sense?
yes.
Okay. So that's this part of it. Now, do you have any questions on that?
Does budget get thought of yet, or?
No, we're not there yet.
Okay.
Actually, as far as the budget's concerned, there was a fairly long section that described the budget in the park.
Oh, that's
And
right.
It became outdated so quickly that what we've decided, or what we've talked about doing, and it will be at a future meeting, is just have a very short section talking about the budget, that the town would include a budget.
I was referring to like the comment that says, include funding for invasive plant removal in the annual park budget.
Well, yeah,
So-
but that's something we already plan to do. And, you know, one of the things is, like, right now, our group that's managing the park is very passionate about invasive plants. And a lot of that work is done, organized and done with volunteer work. And, you know, what, as exampled by this is 20 years later that we're getting around to revising this plan, we're who are now have been involved in it, may not be the ones managing it in 10 years. And, you know, as we've all been on committees, when we get off the committee, the new leadership might have a different priority. So we felt it was important to be very specific about the priorities, like invasives, erosion. And now, and you'll see when we get into these more specific ones, we have, when this was done, the elm tree was disappearing, but now we're losing the beech trees, the emerald ash borer is coming in. So we felt it was important to sort of get those things we've now added, but I'm jumping ahead of myself. I'm gonna stay with this. Okay, so, all right, now we go to the next section. Well, do you wanna approve the sections by section, or how do you wanna do this?
Let's keep track of what we agree to, so then we'll do a motion at the end of the
all
evening. So this is section D.
Yeah.
We agree to.
The only thing in section D, the work plan, I just have that come up to the top. I don't know if that's just the way it,
Probably just the way it
Printed out.
printed out.
When we're all done, there probably ought to be an edit
Oh,
or
well,
something.
we're gonna, yeah, when we're all done, we'll do an edit. Okay, so here we are in wildlife maintained meadows and shrubland bird habitat areas. So we added, in the original document, it was units, let me get to that section, hold on.
last one, next last one.
What's the top of the piece of paper?
Wildlife, maintained meadows and shrubland bird habitat areas.
Yeah.
It's the next last one in our packet.
Hedgerow, I have hedgerow.
One more, two more.
Before, then I have
Three
woodland
more.
and old orchard.
No, going to the bottom.
Go in the other direction.
You got another,
I don't have it anymore.
You don't have it?
What are we looking for?
Wildlife is the first word.
this one here.
Doesn't mean I don't have it, but I just didn't see it. Okay, well, why don't you keep talking to us then?
Okay,
And this
so,
section letter number is what?
do you want a copy of it?
Sure, you have it right. Don't go run out.
It would have been just before the landscape.
Jenny has a copy for
maps.
you.
Okay.
Okay, so we added in northwest portion of Unit P and western portion of the scenic overlook. So the scenic, when we wrote this plan, the scenic overlook wasn't managed by the oversight committee. So we have been integrating that, looking at that as one piece of property.
That scenic oversight was what was donated to the town?
The
Or
town
purchased.
owned it before
The park
the park.
existed.
So they were considered separate. And what's happened historically is that the oversight committee has taken over the oversight of the overlook. The oversight of the overlook. Hey, I got that right. Yeah, right, fast. I got it twice. So anyway, we felt that this was important to have the management of that piece of property incorporated into this document. So we've added the western portion of the scenic overlook to the maintained meadows and shrubland bird habitat areas. We added it in the agriculture as well, so this isn't new to this moment. This is something we've been doing along. Okay, so that's the first.
So
and-
may I ask something
Yeah.
about that part? We're talking about if I was to drive to the north side of Churchill Road to come out onto Route 7, which I
Right.
did just the other day.
Right,
And I sat there and I'm looking at the overlook,
right,
correct?
that's right.
And what I noticed, and I've been noticing for many years, that the trees are getting even larger now that are running north and south, right, like in the middle, and we got a nice big field by Route 7, then you got a row of trees starting to
Well, we
get
have the
bigger, even
hedgerow.
bigger.
No, you're
And
looking,
now-
that's a different area than
I'm
we're
not
talking
looking.
about.
Okay, where are you talking about?
South.
South
of that. There's a,
hedgerow.
south of the hedgerow.
Okay. And I'm just asking about those trees. Are we gonna find them? Because they're starting to block the view very much now.
Yeah, and those trees were planted when the park was created, and I think, the purpose was to kind of, if they go along the trail, they're near the trail, they're near where the riparian buffer is, and part of it was to screen,
The noise.
Route 7 for people who are walking on the trail, and they were purchased and planted when the park was created. So we haven't, I think we've removed some that have been, that were diseased, we've thinned them a little bit, but we've left those trees.
But they're getting to their mature height. They're not gonna, they're red maples. They're not gonna be big trees. Like
Ones that are
they're,
between Unit A
but
and
that's
Unit
not the
B.
overlook,
Right.
just to be clear.
Okay,
That's,
The
the
ones,
overlook
yes,
is where the
A and-
old ball
A and
fields
B.
used to be.
okay, show me what unit is it?
Must really be old. The old ball fields.
Oh, ball fields, what was that?
That's where Bunny played
Softball.
softball.
If you look at we have an updated map.
This is the one I got in my
Here. That one was the one
packet.
with the original plan. This one shows the overlook as part of the park.
Which section?
So
is that?
here's the
It's the
overlook.
overlook, scenic overlook.
So you're Church Hill, right? You're talking about this hedgerow of tree, and I'm talking about this piece of property right there. Just so you know.
But we
But
do
yes,
hear about
those
the
red
trees quite
maples,
often because people have been concerned about them.
we have our eye on them.
Stephen Brooks trees.
And thinking about future replacements for shorter trees or not?
We have different opinions on the committee.
Yeah,
I will not name who has what opinion.
that's very
But
judicious.
some
of you.
people feel like the trees should stay, and some people feel like the trees should go. But we are watching them very closely, and they serve a lot of purposes. They protect a walker from some road noise. They are getting close to being mature of height, so it's not like they're going to be towering oaks or
They're gonna go
maples.
wider.
And
And it's
No,
really-
they're
really
not
gonna
big
last.
trees. That's why they picked them. That's why Gail spec'd those, because they're red maples. They have a short lifespan. They live 25 years. It's been 20. We're already seeing some die. So, and it's expensive getting trees taken out. And we like them for the return, but it is something
it's about
to
the
think
view,
about.
right.
But anyway, we do address those things in this plan. But putting in the wildlife, maintain meadows and shrubland, bird and habitat, those are the two big changes we did and then because we had the Audubon of Vermont funding, a grant we got, we added these last 3 paragraphs to reflect what happened in that report.
3 paragraphs or
Or
where?
the very first part, the introduction,
Okay,
these 3 paragraphs.
I see. Yep.
We also added in paragraph 2 about pollinators, which weren't in the original plan. And then, as I said, the next 3 paragraphs discuss the establishment of the shrubland bird habitat in Unit P. So Unit P was a maintained meadow. So that's what that. And then the management standards, we changed the brush hogging to be from 2 to 3 years to 3 to 5 with an emphasis on selective cutting because the research now tells us that we don't want to clear the meadows every year because of the pollinators and insects and bird habitat for winter. So we're doing selective. It's also very expensive to brush hog. So we've been trying 3 to 5 years, helps us with our budget to, pick where we need to do it. Again, we've added invasive plant removal to the management standards because we have the invasive species management plan we're following. And overseeding, we talk about seeding because it used to be that they would do some plowing of the field and then instead of seeding it, they would leave it fallow for the year. Now, we we've kind of changed that because, as you know from the agriculture, we're in hay now. We don't do corn up at the park. We're just hay. So that means that we do, when we clean out a hedgerow like we did, which you should be happy because that made that a pretty area. And you can see now from Larry's bench, which is the bench at the top, we seeded it with native plants so that we didn't just leave raw ground. So that's what that suggests. Okay. So that's basically, and then again, the work
So that's the
plan.
second piece that you want us to, go ahead.
What?
I'm good, I'm still.
Okay, so, and then the work plan reflects the management standards, okay?
Yep.
All right, so now we're moving to hedgerows. Okay, now hedgerows is, you would really not like what they had before because there's even an exhibit that shows us how to plant a tree. We have never had the money to maintain the hedgerows the way that the original document suggested. So what we've done is we've left the description pretty much the same, and then we went and changed our management standards a little. We felt it was important right now to say that hedgerows will not be removed. They're a really integral part of the agricultural landscape. And because of the larger equipment farmers are using now, there's kind of a movement to get rid of hedgerows. So we felt it was really critical in the park to state very clearly hedgerows will not be removed. And that the existing ag access points will be maintained. So that's why we added that. We also added the panoramic view of the Adirondacks, which you should like, will be maintained by controlling the heights of the trees and by maintaining window openings. So like, for example, a solution compromise kind of could be where you were talking about is maybe taking out 1 or 2 trees so there's windows without removing the whole thing, leaving windows. So we felt that was an important way to sort of have a way to compromise if the panoramic views are being interrupted. We kept the next one's the same, the next one's the same, and then we did the windows again. And then we added again the invasive removals, and we're slowly trying to remove the invasive non-native plants. Again, the native trees stays the same, and then the hedgerows, that stays the same. And then the work plan's basically the same.
Paragraph calls.
Which one? Oh, the other big change we did, I'm sorry, I forgot to say this. So one of the things this document has, when we get into these other more specific areas, is they actually broke out the management standards. It was for recreation, wildlife, and so we combined them to just be management standards. We just felt that was cleaner than having repeating things, okay?
In the work plan, number 1, just need a period
Oh, I'm looking at the old document going,
right before, at the end of the first sentence.
oh, okay.
I think that's what's,
Do you have a, I think I have a pencil. Here, I have a pencil. I got it. God, you're good at those.
He's the editor-in-chief.
Okay, all right. Anyway, okay,
copy
so.
edit.
Copy editor-in-chief.
Okay,
Yep,
is that clear?
that's fine.
All right.
Noting those sections that you want us to vote on. I have a little
That's
stack
right.
here. Okay.
All right, so now the next one is woodlands. We haven't addressed the hiking trails yet. We haven't gotten there. Okay, woodlands. Okay, so that stays the same.
Just to be clear, Jesse, is it successional woodlands or?
No, there's 2. First woodlands
Okay,
is
woodlands.
next, I think.
Management unit of-
Yeah. Management, yeah, there's difference between the woodlands and the successional woodlands and Old Orchard, okay? So woodlands are like where Turkey Lane goes through, that are woods. That's what they are. And then the successional is areas that were growing up when we got the park, and we're managing them to stay successional instead of becoming woods.
Perpetually
same.
succession.
Perpetual succession. I'm trying to fight back. I understand that the honeysuckle and the grapevines really help us with that cause, don't they? As they take down the woods. But we're trying. Okay, so that section, we updated a sentence about an abandoned orchard was removed, and we believe that it was in Unit P. And we added information about bats. The second paragraph is, we thought it was in the original document about neighboring properties, and we're so lucky right now. We have some amazing neighbors that are really interested and involved in the park, and we thought, you know what, they have trails coming in, and there's streams run through their property, and that we thought it would be really nice to have some cooperative conservation and management of these woodlands, and they're open to it, so we thought that would be a good goal to put in the management plan. Let's see. We did the same thing as we did with the other one. We combined the management standards for agriculture, recreation, and wildlife to be just one section. We thought that was clearer and easier to follow. So we combined those three sections, and we really didn't change a lot of that plan. And then the work plan, again, we added the invasive species management plan as an exhibit. We added the 4, 5, and 6 because of the, we've planted, now they have an elm tree that's supposedly resistant, so we've planted those, and we have been approached about doing some chestnuts and maybe some butternuts. So we thought it would be good to sort of maybe have the park become a demonstration. It might be that we can get a grant for something like that. And then there is a hope, some people hold out hope that we can save our ash trees. So we put in about trying to put some ash trees, an important tree, and how to manage it, so that we figured that if it's in the management plan, when we come to the select board and ask for funds to do that kind of thing, that we could point to the plan. So we did that. Okay? All right, and then now we come to successional woodlands and old orchards. And the first 3 paragraphs are new, and they describe the current conditions, including description of invasive plants and the effort to control them. Shrubland birds have become much more endangered since the plan was done, so we added a paragraph about that. We didn't have the Velco transmission corridor when we got the park, so we thought that was important to add. And the last paragraph is pretty much the same. And as in the other 2 exhibits that I've talked about before, we combined the management standards to make it easier. Again, the work plan reflects the work we've done and the documentation and plans that we have. And we added about the ash, and we added about putting nesting boxes and wildlife reintroduction and enhancement. Okay? All right. And then now we have the wetlands, ponds, and streams. We updated and expanded the descriptions in this section. And we added a paragraph about, to describe how the water flows through the park, because there wasn't really a description in the old one. So that's kind of, that 3rd paragraph is really sort of telling how the water moves through the park. And then we have a new member who's very concerned about vernal pools, which are important. And so we added a vernal pool.
What's that mean,
vernal pools, and it was mentioned in the original document, but it wasn't,
Vernal pools are the landlocked equivalent of a tidal pool. I think they pool up with
in the springs
rain
where
events, and then
salamanders and,
and they're there for,
Low spot in your lawn that's always got standing water in it.
it has a name.
it has a name. But the vernal pool is like you're walking through the woods and all of a sudden there's a little pond that you've never noticed before, and it's May, and then you go back in June or July and you say, whoa, what happened to that little pond? That's a vernal pool.
It's just dirt and leaves.
And just dirt and leaves. So that's where a lot of things are very important. So we put that description in. And then again, we combined the management standards. We added the vernal pool again. We expanded the buffer. Everything else is the same. We put in invasive species again. Everything else is the same. And we added on the work plan reflects the implementation required by the original plan. Everything else is the same. And we added the neighbors again, because we're having a good time with our neighbors, so.
Justin, when you talk about a buffer, a 50 undisturbed buffer, that means no mowing, no,
50-foot buffer?
yeah,
Yeah, that was in the original plan, yeah.
Okay.
That's taken directly from the original plan. Let me see if I can
and that
find
does
it.
mean no mowing, or no,
No trails near the way they wanted it. I know I saw it when I read it. I can't I'm not seeing it right now, but yeah, that was in the 50, allow a 50-foot buffer between trails and wetlands to minimize disturbance of nesting wetland birds. Okay?
the one above that,
What?
the one above that one that you just read?
Wetlands shall be maintained as a natural wildlife I'm reading off the old document.
Oh, okay, I was reading in the new one.
I'm sorry?
The new one, vernal pools will be maintained as isolated pools with an undisturbed buffer of at least 50 feet and a limited disturbance buffer of at least 200 feet?
I know, I'm sorry, I just can't hear a word you're saying. Sorry.
Yeah.
It all just sounds like a mumble. Oh my God, I'm over 60.
He's reading this here. He's reading this one here, the vernal pool.
Okay. Sorry, I'm not trying to be
It's
difficult.
okay. My voice has gotten a little
He's
raspy
reading the
today.
vernal pool
Yeah.
definition and the maintain of the buffer.
Yeah,
And, I mean, what's your question,
Well,
Dean,
the question
about
I-
needing that buffer between a pool that sometimes exists and sometimes doesn't?
Yeah.
there aren't that many of them, and they're pretty remote. There aren't trails near them anyway. It was more for future, like if somebody says, oh, let's put a trail through here. Those areas around the vernal pools are very sensitive at certain times of year. Certain times of year, it doesn't matter at all. But when the amphibians are moving, it's better not to be.
So are they mapped, so people know where you can mow or where you
Well,
can?
I can bet you Andrew will have it mapped. They're not yet, but he's very enthusiastic about vernal pools, and they're very important.
Okay.
He's right.
This one, as you go in from the parking area, not too far in, it's off the trail toward the south, I think.
Yeah.
And it is well, the trail has been there since the start of the park, and I
Yeah.
think it's been known that it's there. But there isn't really any change to that area except the clearing of invasive plants, and there isn't
Yeah.
much logging that happens, it's the trail clearing.
Yeah.
So I think it's not really difficult to maintain.
Would you like them to be mapped? Is that what you're saying?
Well, for the
Yeah.
care of the park and to follow your plan, it would be nice if they were mapped
Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
for the future.
Yeah, I think it's a great suggestion. What's in our management standards, so it should be mapped. That's good, that's a good suggestion. I mean, it's interesting, as we get new members, which is just so refreshing, that, you know, it's like why you have a management plan. It's because they bring in a different interest where, you know, it's not that we didn't care about vernal pools, it's just not necessarily wasn't on our radar, but like Mark is all about the trees. We're about invasives. So, I mean, it's like, I'm into bird habitat. I mean, it's, you bring these things, so it's important to carry on beyond us. And then the last but not least, we have a tree pest protocol for the general, and this will be an exhibit, which is why it's in a different typeface.
Exhibit.
It's an exhibit. And that is the map we have so
The
far.
beach canker is in the park?
Oh, yeah. it's
Yeah.
been in the- you're lucky if you've been in your woods and seen a healthy beach.
We have a ton of them. up
Yeah,
on
look at them
Philo.
closely.
Okay, they're big. Okay.
If they die from the top down. And the real thing about the emerald ash borer, the beach,
The beach.
beach. The ash borer, the really, really difficult thing is, and it's in Montpelier now. How sad is this? They came up to give a demonstration on inoculating a tree, and the guy coming up was standing in front of the Forest Service in Montpelier, and both trees are infected, and they didn't even know it. And these are the people guarding our trees. So anyway, but the problem is that when they rot from the inside out, so the tree collapses. So you go to pick up a piece of the tree and it just turns to dust in your hand. So these big trees, like the one on Thompson's Point, if it gets infected, they're just a complete nightmare. Because by the time the landowner knows and they fall over, there's no way to clean it up. They're gonna have to like invent giant vacuums to vacuum these trees up.
Or take them early
Or take them early.
and use them for
But
firewood.
it's
or
hard to know if they're infected or not. It's the problem.
So,
All right,
stay with our time schedule.
yep.
You've given us, I have noted them all, we ought to have a motion to accept these sections. Did you have them all, somebody? I mean, I have them, or I could list them, or how do you want to do this?
Just
They're-
refer to
they're-
the revised Charlotte Wildlife, this document, I guess.
You could take it off. This has them listed. I could just quickly
Oh,
tell
this
you the
one does?
titles. This document here has them all.
Okay.
I mean, you could,
So why don't we refer to this document then?
okay,
And these are the details that are referenced here.
right.
So you want to do that first, make a motion?
Sure, motion to approve the revised Charlotte Park and Wildlife Refuge Comprehensive Management Plan as summarized in the draft dated June 9th, draft for Select Board meeting on June 9th,
2018.
2019.
Yeah, it says June 9th, does it meant to
Oh,
say
it does
July?
say June 9th.
Yes.
Well, let's make it, well, that's the
It's
number on
July
the draft.
9th, isn't it?
Well,
Whoops.
it is. You wanna
You're a month behind.
Only
We
a month.
changing the date, or we?
Okay, so the, what?
July
date?
9th.
July 9th.
2018.
Okay, is that seconded?
Second.
Seconded. Are there any further items of discussion with regard to these changes? All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Thank you for your hard work.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, that was
Jenny,
a lot.
a lot of credit. We're getting there.
Only more seconds to go, and 3 of them are really short.
When are you going to come back and visit us again, then?
October.
Oh, really? Do you want to update your
Additional section.
We'll
your
update.
plan at that time and give us a proposal just to say revisions through October, like you said, with the pages that
I
are...
will,
Okay.
but I would like to be able to say revised.
Oh, okay.
The next time we see you, the document should be complete, and we'll come in with it as it complete with the exhibits numbered,
Okay.
which is an editing thing. So Matt, before we come to that meeting,
I will.
we're gonna,
Are you kidding? That was one period.
let the air out of your tires and kidnap you for an hour to read through it. All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for fitting us in, that was good.
The next item we have salary administration policy. There's some, we voted on the minimum wage a month ago. And so this changes the policy to, it's under track changes, the red ink, that shows you how we've captured the minimum wage. So, I mean, I can walk through it, or go to the bottom of page 1 of the policy. We now go to pay grades 16 pay grades 5 through 20. Each pay grade has a 5% difference, no change there. Page 5 from 20 are decoupled from the minimum wage. So therefore, steps 0 to 5, 0 to 4 don't exist anymore. It's just called minimum wage, beach attendant, library services assistant.
So, I just have a question about the wording of not necessarily, so basically, naturally, if the minimum wage ever approaches the pay rate or pay grade 5, step 0. Could you guys maybe, I mean, approaches is a very vague term. I mean, that could be 5 cents, that could be 50 cents. Is there any way to put a percentage in there instead of just approaches?
Hey, can I give you a recommendation? If you look at the back of the policy, and I have to find it, it says that every 5 years, we will look at the policy for its equity and fairness. And it seems to me that that's an open door, especially if there's an overlap. I mean, it's not going to work for us if minimum wage exceeds level 5s. We've got to be doing something.
Right, but I mean, approaches, so, I don't know, I guess just approaches is so very vague. It could be a penny difference from grade 5 to minimum wage. And when do you address that? When it exceeds it, or when it's a penny different, or when it's 50 cents different? In the last 5 years, minimum wage has gone up $2.50. So if you go by a 5-year, I mean, you guys could be reviewing it a lot quicker. I'm just thinking that approaches is just a very broad term, and that I think it needs to be a little more definitive on when you're going to evaluate how close it is to step 5.
I think it says if anything would be to change, what was the one that you were reading, Lane? Every
I
5
gotta
years?
find it, I read it here someplace.
I think it should be at a maximum
Oh,
of
yeah.
5 years.
Here it is. The town administrator will review all job descriptions of the appropriate supervisor employee as necessary at least once every 5 years. Or if there are changes that could affect a final job factor score, be reevaluated, a pay grade change is required. It's listed there. So there's a mechanism in the policy, and the minimum wage approaching our pay sheet from level 5 to 20, there's a mechanism there that says we'll review it, and
Every time the minimum wage goes up, it approaches step 5.
Well,
If
step
you
5
look
goes up every year.
step 5 goes up every year.
It just has to outpace it. So, I mean,
Right.
we could change the word approach to reach, or
Step 5 doesn't go up every year.
it can,
Cost of living will,
especially with
We've
inflation
already
going
had
up,
1 year that this policy's been in effect, that we did not have a cost of living.
which was
But the state still gave a 50 or 75 cent raise to minimum wage that year.
pretty rare.
right.
So the simple, and then we had 1 year, it was what, 0.8. So that was still less than the 50 cents that the minimum wage got. What I'm trying to say is I think your minimum wage to number 5, that gap is gonna go away quickly.
Well, it may or it may not.
And when you say approaches, I think every time the minimum wage goes up, if you look at the definition of approach, it's approaching step 5.
Most years, we have a cost of living adjustment. I mean, I think you have to keep, you personally want to have us keep attention to it. I think each year as we look at it, we look at the cost of living. I mean, the system won't work if the cost of living exceeded pay grade 5. We have to take an action.
So that's what we could say. Naturally, if the minimum wage ever surpasses the pay rate of pay grade 5, step 0. So we could just swap approaches for surpasses.
Okay.
Because that's the intent.
Yes.
Is that would be when a problem exists in the fairness of the grid.
How come the minimum wage isn't on like a separate, why does it have to be on the grid
This
still?
is not the grid. We have to change our thought process. This is called a pay sheet. This pay sheet, our professional employees from 5 to 20, it shows them where their pay was, where their pay is, what they can expect. And in our pay sheet, we also show minimum wage, beach attendant, library services assistant. So this is our pay sheet that is a reflection of what the expectation can be for future employees.
Okay, so if I'm a part-time, minimum wage
Yep.
beach attendant.
Yep.
Am I going to get this pay sheet in my packet for starting? Am I going to start?
Maybe you want to be a
So now I'm
library.
going to look, and I happen to be a savvy teenager and want to see how much the library or the town clerk makes.
Right. Perfect. Fritz said it, and you repeated what Fritz said to me last week, and that is a professional employee is 5 to 20. This is what they could expect.
Right. So why would we put a professional and just minimum wage on the same document?
Well, it's really just the same.
Could be just the next page
Well, it is.
beyond. It doesn't have to be on the same.
It is here. Here it's saying these are really, this is separate. But here, what anyone in town can look at is what everyone in town who's employed by the town makes in one place. Rather than needing to say, okay, some people are on page A, other people getting paid in town are on page B. Anyone who receives income from the town, any citizen can look on one page and say, this is the pay sheet. How the levers work is very different, and that's what this editing is, the decoupling is saying, okay, there was an issue with minimum wage, those last two are not tied into the whole system of the increasing 5% per grade and the evaluation system. It's just, there are two professions that are making minimum wage. The rest are tied to this evaluation system.
On your statement, it's not everybody who draws income from the town, because you don't have Mary Boyd, who's park security, you don't have Callie Griswold, who's animal control on that. You don't have those stipend people
Stipends, I should've just
you
said.
guys aren't on there?
On payroll. Is
But you
everyone
are-
who's on payroll.
No, because you're on payroll, you get a paycheck, but you're not on there.
So what would you say the difference is?
You guys, there are people who draw a paycheck that are on my payroll that do
But what
not.
would you characterize the difference being between the people on here and the?
Stipend versus non-stipend.
Okay. So that's what I meant to say, but thank you.
Okay.
What we've just been talking about the minimum wage approaching or surpassing grade 5 is a good reason to have the minimum wage on here. You can see it. They're all together. You don't have to look at a separate sheet. It's right there.
I think we should put Selectboard on here, just break it out into an average of 2 hours per meeting. And just put our hourly rate down here.
Yeah, we need a negative,
Okay, are you guys
pay
good
grade.
with?
The only thing I'd like to see on here, I know we have the beach attendant and the library assistant, but if there's any other position that happens to get created in the future, is there some way we can just put instead of other minimum wage as determined by the select board? Any other minimum wage position, so that way if something is created,
We will do a job evaluation ranking. And
Right.
we'll determine whether it's a minimum wage or a professional employee.
and add it to the list.
Sure.
Yeah, if it comes out below 176, then it would be minimum wage
Which is what we've done.
on the
Right, well, I
scoring.
mean, instead of doing, I was just trying to do a general term instead of a specific, but.
Trying to see if there's anything in the policy that addresses new positions. I don't really remember there being that.
Yeah, there is on page 4, it says new
Well, I don't know
position.
if it- Yes.
When a new position is created, the town administrator and select board will review the job description and determine the final job factor score required to place the position on the appropriate pay grade. If it's appropriate to put it on minimum wage, we'll put it on minimum wage.
So in this markup version, you had of the appendixes were lined out on this too. Is there a reason for that?
The original appendices were hypothetical and they didn't list positions, they listed pay grades, and I think we're using the,
You know what these were? These were just what the word says, an example.
yeah.
Since we were creating a policy that was totally new, and we're on the top of page 2, we had some examples of pay grade, placement grid, future salary ranges, assuming a cost of living 1.5. So through all the discussions we've had over the last couple of years, we've kind of ironed that out, I think. And I don't think we need examples anymore. We have our pay sheet. The next event that'll happen is the cost of living, which will come around early January, and that'll affect it, and then we'll have a new pay sheet effective for
FY19.
July 1st of 2019.
Actually, the budget will be the next thing we talk about.
Oh, the budget for,
Because, I mean, if you, everywhere you read, there's pressures on wages for, you know, there's hardly any unemployment, minimum wage keeps going up, and it makes you want to think that you might want to look at revising the grid, not just for COL, but to stay competitive.
If we're not getting
I
those
was reading
hires.
something about the number of people that have gone to a new job is increasing significantly, and their average increase in salary is like 15 to 20%. So employees are on the move, so if we want to keep them, we're gonna have to be a little proactive, perhaps.
I had just a couple of
Beat the approaches.
formatting, copy editing.
yep.
Table 1 is broken up, it's a little hard to read.
Right.
If we can knock that to page 3, so the whole thing is on page 3.
Yep.
And then I think we can get rid of some of that space underneath table 1, so B can still remain on there, but maybe we could pull the content of rule 3 from page 4.
So once you delete, I think if you're looking at the underlined strikeout version,
You're
the
going
red
to
line.
delete these two
Yeah, it goes-
spaces.
Okay,
It
so
goes-
maybe just, we'll look at that.
Yeah.
To see, then the last thing, under section 4, there's capital A, capital B, as far as the headings.
Section 4, okay.
So under capital B
Where
is,
the others is lowercase.
it's the lowercase should be, then be numbers. Instead
1,
of
2, 3.
lowercase a, it should be 1, 2, 3
Okay.
through
And,
F. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then section capital C.
Okay. And could you just repeat the first items that you said before that?
Making sure the table doesn't get split,
Okay, yeah.
and having rule 3, the text to rule 3 be with rule 3. But like you said, that might,
That might
Happen
correct-
when
that
you-
might correct when you
that could
take out the other
self-correct.
2 lines.
Okay.
I have another suggestion. You got yours?
yeah, that was it.
I'm on the top of current page 3, and I think for clarity that came up a couple of weeks ago. It says after 20 years of employment with the town, it says 2% step plus COL. I think we should put the word in one time for clarity. So when you as an employee reach your 20th year, there'll be a one-time bump of 2%. There was some confusion that I heard about, so,
Like, you can interpret it any way you want. On page 2, you can, at the very last sentence, will receive a 2% step increase. Doesn't say a one-time increase.
well, that's what I wanted to clarify.
And that was definitely the intent when we gave the 2% step increase to that employee.
So they can be in the box, and to your point, can be in the words.
And then in the grid here, your pay sheet, it was added, Dean put FY18 up here. Is that what you all want?
Wait, where?
On this pay rates, FY19, he's added the,
For the town clerk, treasurer, FY19 step max plus 2%, just indicated the year that was given.
Oh, I see, max was 2%. So fiscal year 18 for town clerk treasurer, is that what your point is, fiscal year 18? So when that was given.
Right.
So then if you're the next one, Dean, it'll say fiscal year 21,
Right.
whatever the time I say.
Is it the, having a hard time, the technical librarian is at max for
Yeah,
years too?
There's 2 other positions, technical and the
Yeah, the interlibrary loan coordinator,
They're at max on the grid, but they're not at 20 years.
so that we should correct?
They're at max and they're not at 20 years, that's correct.
So we should put the years?
No, you mean when they will be?
In that column, isn't that the years that people have been there? The 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th column from the right?
It's the step, I guess, you mean to indicate the year in
Oh,
which
I
they will get a 2%?
Got it. So, okay.
That's the step they're on, that has no reflection on how many years they've been here. On step 8 and only been here 4.
Well, it does indicate that you came in at 5 and been here 3 years.
But I still
when
won't
you go
get that
back.
2% until I've been here 20.
So how, that's not being reflected
And
yet
I'll be
in a column.
at max at step 15, so I'll be at max,
It's kind of merged
7
in
years.
column Y.
and I'll still have like 9 years to go before I
Before.
get the 2%.
That's just being tracked internally?
Yeah.
It's just not
I
tracked.
got a
outward.
start date for everybody and their anniversary dates and payroll.
It's not something anyone misses. The
Right,
20-year
it's
mark.
not on that, yeah.
Okay.
So are we,
We didn't make any changes to the
We did,
pay sheet, did we?
no,
No.
the only change we made was the 2% here, right, at one time.
Well, in 2 locations, as Carrie pointed out. In the very bottom line on page 2, it said employee will receive a one-time 2%.
but it doesn't say it right now, does she get her 2%
Yes,
for
she
the last 2 years?
No, she got one time.
That was in response to the specific question, if, you mean if somebody's been here more than 20 years, they don't get anything? And the
Right.
response was to add, at 20 years, you'll get a 2%,
Right,
to reward the amount of time you've been here, nothing else.
right. Is it really a step increase or is it a pay increase?
where?
I'm still on the words. Bottom of page 2, an employee will receive a one-time 2% pay increase.
Oh, yeah, 2%
Pay increase.
salary increase, right?
Whatever
The
word you,
hourly-
Or
so
hourly
makes
increase.
it 2 hours, so you don't want to say salary.
so what do you want, salary?
Pay is good.
Pay. That was the intent, what Fritz just said, as I remember.
So then in the table 1,
Yeah,
what's the language? After 20 years of employment,
with the town.
It'd be
A
change that to
one-time?
One-time pay increase plus
COL.
COL.
You could put it on the right-hand side, right?
I think that's where Frank was looking.
Okay, so make a one-time 2% step, one-time pay and COL,
One time 2% pay
and COL,
plus COL.
plus COL.
No, is that what this should be too? All these instead of being steps should be pay. And every one of them should be pay.
Those are steps.
Those are
Those are steps.
This way.
After you
One
get to,
two, there's a percent.
so it ends at
To
15.
cross, each of these lines from step to step.
Motion to approve the, what are we calling this? Salary Administration Policy Draft Amendment dated July 9th, 2018.
Second?
Is that seconded?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. 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 Aye was 4, and you were,
Fine with it.
okay, 5 ayes. Okay, thank you. Next item. The fellow for the Trails Committee, I understand, will not be here.
Right,
He'll be here for the next meeting we have.
yep.
But the Trail Committee is here.
Selection of computer. You skipped
Oh, did I, oh, yeah. I jumped the gun. Are you prepared, Dean, since you just got back?
I did review the proposals and made,
And so did Christina, like we asked her to do.
I'm going to recuse myself as some of these bidders are tenants of ours, where I work.
Okay, let me see how, okay, I'm just curious. Seems to me the left side of the office and the right side of the office needs to have coordinated. You've only been back for a few hours. Have you had time to coordinate to make a recommendation?
no.
Or do you need more time?
extensively. I'd be fine putting this off to the next meeting.
you
Christina
need
and
to
I had a
sit-
brief discussion, but
Okay,
we can talk more thoroughly about it and come to the next select board meeting with probably a joint recommendation.
So let's hear what Christina, because we asked them to do their stuff.
right, but there are many people that use
That's
it.
what I'm here for, so, I
Right.
mean, I.
That's why.
What's your comment?
I mean, I got the same numbers as Dean, and, I mean, they're pretty plain in English to you guys. I mean, you guys can look at the monthly fee and then look at the server fee, and I think you'll see a considerable difference when you include the server fee in there. And if you go over a 12-month period, doing the monthly fee plus the low-end cost of a server, you'll still find that we are not talking apples to apples when we're talking costs. So SimQuest comes out high on their equipment, or labor, I should say, of installing the server. If you do a total server cost, SimQuest comes out about $6,000 more than the next person or the next company on there, which is the tech group. So when you're looking at monthly costs, the tech group's only $100 more a month. So that's only $1,200 more a year. And when you factor in the new server, which we absolutely need, and I just don't think it's right to buy the server from one company and have another company install it. And we would actually be saving money by going with the tech group. The tech group is also somebody, I know Dean hasn't had a chance to check references on everybody because he has only been back, but the tech group has 27 27 towns, municipalities that they service. I also know that Troy used to use them. That's where this server came from, I believe. So I'm not really sure if it's something that needs to be analyzed and discussed at a later meeting. The numbers kind of speak for themselves, and it's not an unfamiliar company to us. We do it for a year, we figure out how they work out for us, and we move on from there.
Let me ask you, we defined the server in our request for a proposal, but we let contractors offer an alternative. So are these the defined servers, or are they the alternatives?
These are the quote is for the server that we spec'd.
Okay, every one of these is the server we get. So for me, I still come back, I know you're comfortable. Dean hasn't even seen these, I don't know how much time you spent yet.
He hasn't had a lot of time to look at it.
Does it hurt anything if we were to wait 2 weeks, or?
Other than I gotta come back for another meeting.
Well, you mean, you'd feel bad if you missed next meeting, wouldn't you?
Probably not. Okay. I mean, my point is I just don't know, you have the numbers in front of you. What more breakdown do you need?
References.
I do agree that references need to be
Just
checked.
as you spoke up 2 or 3 months ago that you weren't happy and we hadn't conferred with you, I think the other side of the office deserves the same.
I totally.
Okay. I mean, there's no rush as far as the decision, because we have a month-to-month extension of what we've got now, right?
Not 100% sure on that.
But I think we do.
Now, didn't we, did we check references on Tech Group when we hired SimQuest? Because Tech Group was part of the original proposal when we hired somebody.
I
new.
think it was just checked SimQuest, or, checked the references for SimQuest. I don't think we checked them for all the contractors.
So, how's the board feel?
I hate computers.
Well, Dean, do you need more time in discussing this with the other side, or?
I agree that the tech group is a known quantity to us. They worked with Troy when he was our primary IT person, and he used them to buy equipment for us. I think they're a good firm. I wouldn't have any qualms with approving them.
There's another way we can do it. We could vote on it
Pending reference check.
pending your review and check. And if there's something that came up that you weren't satisfied with, you can just let us know.
That's a good idea.
I think you get the recommendation from both sides.
What was that?
You get the recommendation from both sides. I mean, if we're gonna get a recommendation from this side of the town hall, we should get the recommendation from that side. I know Christina is.
She's happy, but
She's happy with the tech group, but we'll make sure Mary's all set and everything.
And Dean just said you were.
So, I mean, if you're gonna do that, then if you're gonna do it based on whether when the references are checked, let everybody look at them.
that's what we're suggesting, right?
Yeah.
So you're good with that?
Yep.
I guess you can excuse it, or is it?
Yeah, I guess the only question I had, sitting over here, is, it still says contractor may recommend a different specification than described in the RFP. Was SimQuest given that same opportunity? And did the price change?
Yeah,
Did
they spec'd the machine that they recommended. or they quoted the machine that they recommended.
But going out, having it, being shopped around on them, they didn't want to spec something that they recommended we minimally had? You know, were they giving us the now recommendation the first time because it wasn't put out to bid?
Well, I would assume they had the opportunity, and in the, what we sent out, they had the opportunity to look at it and say, oh, this is what the town wants, this is what needs to be done, and we could also substitute something else and recommend something else. So, I mean, to me, they had the opportunity to put the same language as the other prospects did.
And so then my follow-up question is, with Tech Group and Panergy and Open Approach, it sounds like they all gave a price of the exact same spec. Do they recommend a different spec?
That's what I was wondering. Are they going to bait and switch? In other words, they gave us a quote on this equipment. Now, with those words in this box, can they go offer an alternative?
I think two things. One is I think that they would likely want to or recommend that we allow them to make their own recommendation, but I don't think that will change the hardware, software costs very much. It may differ slightly, probably go down, maybe possibly go up just a little bit, but the main difference in price with SimQuest is with their labor, which is quite a bit above the others. So if the cost of the hardware, software changes a couple $100 one way or another, I don't think it's going to be a big change.
A
Christine?
couple of the companies made it clear they actually thought that some of the specs were a little bit of overkill for us. So they did say that they were providing those numbers, but that they could end up being less because they felt that it was a little much for what we actually needed.
And one of the issues that seemed to come up was the issue of licenses. SimQuest, the way they worded their software requirement was that we needed 12 licenses, and the other companies questioned that. So I guess Microsoft licensing is a little bit complicated, and they use virtual machines to determine the number of licenses, and there might be, I think there's doubling of licenses to be able to serve 2 servers. So it's, I think when that can be clarified, that will address some of the differences between the proposals.
So once again, you're okay if we make a motion and you can concur to us through email or object through email. If you object, we can relook at it the next meeting. If you concur, we'll proceed with the contract.
Sounds good.
Well, I'd like to have in there if he's gonna check references and stuff, I was wondering if they could, we could figure out before this is all approved to make sure that what server we're actually approving.
That's the
So
point I was trying to.
so I'd like to be able to come back to this, even if we chose Tech Group, to come back to this and say, this is the server that was described in our proposal, and this is the server that we recommend, and these are the prices.
I think we have to pick them based on the RFP, because if we change the rules of the RFP, we have to let them all bid again, because that's what our purchasing policy says.
And the other thing, I don't think somebody's gonna come in here and do all the work of trying to map out what server you want before they actually have like a contract with us. I think some of them wanna wait, and if they win the bid, then they're gonna come in and take a look at everything we got, what we're looking for, and go from there.
So Frank, would you rather wait or vote?
Well, we won't know for sure what the actual server will be unless we rebid it. So I think we have to, with that particular option, we have to just
I think you can negotiate with the final selected candidate. Not price-wise, but just if they want to propose
You
something
can
different.
negotiate changes, but if you
Change.
change a spec, then you
Right.
have to re-RFP it.
We vote so they can move on.
Well, I'm waiting to see what Frank wants to do, because I just like to give the right side of the office the same opportunity as the left side of the office had, that's why. I am prepared to give Dean time if he wants it, and I want to hear what Frank has, it's tough, it's gotta be,
Right side of the office only looked at numbers, we didn't call references or anything, so that's all we did was look at numbers and go based on them. And the interview when they walk through the building.
And everybody was here for the walk through the building?
Yeah.
Except for the approach people, what's he called, open approach, he was not.
They didn't come. for the
No, he didn't
walkthrough.
come for the walkthrough, the other ones were
For
here.
the other three, we
Yeah.
visited with the town person. And just, I guess just to be clear, if you're wanting references checked, would it just be for tech group or would it be for the other candidates as well?
no, I would just check the way, if you go through this, or if we, I guess we're about to, if we vote,
Right.
it'll be tech group.
Yeah.
So we're just asking you to verify that you're satisfied
Okay.
with that, if that's the way we go.
Yeah. Sounds good.
I wouldn't go to the others, I mean, why spin them up?
Right.
Okay, what's the pleasure of the board here?
So it's a motion to approve tech groups, subject to confirmation of their references by Dean.
Second?
Okay? All in favor, any other comments? All in favor say aye.
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 Okay. Make sure whatever references you got, you give to Mary and Christine, so they all get to read it. So when he gets references, make sure to give you guys copies of them.
I had a bunch of town clerks that already gave me a great recommendation on when I posed the questions, so.
Well.
That's our clerk's occasional.
Heck with you.
Good evening, Trails.
Hello.
So I see this topic here, I've seen it before. What's the next step?
Park Road, oh my gosh.
So,
So,
tell us what you're thinking.
well, so first off, we had thought we were gonna walk with you guys in May and kind of show you the underpass and all that, but we had that big rain, it all got washed out. And so we were gonna have the underpass celebration last Saturday. It's now moved to September 8th. The state has said they will be done with fixing the washout by then. The actual trail is all fixed, but they still have some work to do kind of on the sides there to get that done. So I just wanted to update you on that.
Okay.
Put it on your calendars. Yeah, you'll
September
all
8th.
be receiving invitations. Yeah, September 8th, 11 to 1.
Party in the pipe.
Party in the pipe. There we go. All right, party in the pipe. I didn't put that on the invitation, but I might need it. So State Park Road, obviously, we still want to go ahead and get that done. I had contacted Jim Donovan about getting the wetlands permit, and he actually has agreed to do it for free. He doesn't want to use any of our money, so that we could then use the money on the trail.
And Jim Donovan is, remind me?
Oh, Jim Donovan, what's his
He's
title?
a state,
No, he's a resident. He does this kind of work
Oh.
as
He was
a
the one that did the
professional.
permitting on on the co-housing
Okay.
section of
Still
the
our
trail, I'm sorry.
Chittenden County.
okay.
He is the rep, yeah, to
So you
Chittenden.
fill out the application, is that what you're saying?
He can fill out the application, and he can work with whoever is actually doing the wetlands permit.
He did all the planning on co-housing.
Right, and actually
did,
get the permit,
yes.
right. So we will actually need to pay for the permit itself, but he is willing to do all the work pro bono, which is so nice of him
So,
to do that.
I don't get too bogged down, but what's it mean? Does that mean you want a corridor that allows us to go through there? What will this permit give us if it's successful? Or don't we know yet?
What the wetlands permit will do is to show us what the wetlands people agree is the best trail to go down through there according to the easements that we currently have. So, did the horse farm get approved? Do you know? If that,
They have they received a subdivision approval with conditions. It's still in the appeal period.
okay, but,
In the appeal period.
in the appeal period.
Isn't there
okay.
another, this is the horse farm they're talking about?
Yeah.
Isn't there another hearing?
Four
or-
Meadows Farm.
Yeah, so in there is a 20-foot right-of-way along State Park Road in addition to what we already have along there for the town road. So that gives us some flexibility along there, and then there's also that 50-foot right-of-way, right? Is it 50 or for
It's-
Jonathan Couture's?
It's 20 feet wide, but it can be 100 feet.
Oh, 100 feet, the flexibility. So we have that across the brook. And then the rest of it is probably closer to the road, but it's pretty flat and we don't really need it. So that the wetlands people and Jim Donovan would look at where the wetlands are and where would be the best trail for that whole section.
And what's required?
And what is required, yeah, so probably staying as far away from the wetland, I don't know exactly how they do it, but they are the ones that would determine that, so.
So you don't know if you go north or south of the wetland? You don't know which, you don't know which solution would be best. And if it's south of the wetland, it means the show would be close to the road. If it's north of the wetland, it would be around and about.
That's one of the reasons we're
Right.
here today. That's one of the reasons why we're here today, is to kind of talk about that.
Yeah.
And talk about funding and like the next step, because we can't leave it like it is. It's pretty dangerous like it is right now, with people dumping out onto State Park and just scooting around, on the side of the road with cars coming, and there's a hill there. I don't think we need to take the next step forward.
But do we have
So-
to wait for this wetland permit?
You can't do anything till you have your permits in place, right?
Okay.
So we can't do any actual trail. And that's the same as when we were on the co-housing. So this is the first step in the process, and they are the experts to tell us, the wetlands have been delineated on that subdivision, so they're all delineated, so then it's up to the wetlands people to determine the best route for it.
Yeah.
I mean, my guess is it will go in a little bit, it will come up to the road a little bit. Hopefully in the woods, it might go back in a little more, but that would be more they determine. We had a trail on co-housing with the easement that then got moved because of certain, I think it was that little brook stream that went down one place, so the trail ended up getting moved during the permitting process.
That's true, and Jim was really helpful. in
And Jim
that.
was very helpful with that, so.
But some of this is cost too, because you guys have, we've sort of concluded that you don't want us to do a V-Trans grant.
We don't want what?
The V-Trans grant.
Right, we don't want a $600,000
Right.
grant.
So there's only one grant option if we don't have a V-Trans grant, and that is Forest Parks and Recs,
Okay.
which is the other two grants that we have previously received. They have upped their grants to up to 50,000 now, whereas before it was 20,000. But in this government, there is less money coming into all the states for bike ped options. So we can certainly go ahead and apply for the grant, but again, there are no guarantees that we would get that. So our strategy is to apply for the grant. You'll get a letter like with the V-Trans thing asking for support of the select board. I think it's either November 1st or December 1st. You have to put in your thing saying, I'm going to apply for the grant, and then you apply in January. I can't remember what the deadline is, sometime January, mid-February, and then we find out, I think in April or May.
Just like last year.
This is the
different
forest parks and
program.
recs. Different program.
Right, but it's still in the
Similar
same
timeframe.
timeframe.
Similar timeframe,
So
right.
what percentage does the town have to pay to be, I mean, is it 10% or 20%?
It has changed, so I don't want to say what it will be for next year. I think it was still 20, I think the last time we did it, it was 10 or 15%, do you
But, I
remember?
mean, likely the cost of the trail will be more, it'll likely be like 100% match because the cost of the trail is gonna be, I'm guessing.
I mean, our target was $100,000.
Right, but what we have to pay for that 50,000.
Yeah, I mean,
is-
we'll meet that match, no problem. It'll be probably a 50-50 match, I'm guessing. in terms-
Depending on
Yeah.
how much they
Yeah,
grant. if
yeah.
they
Right,
grant.
so we
Yeah.
just, again, we don't know, it does change year to year. Usually it's a 20% match from the town.
What worries me is, let's say we have a target of 100,000 to do a reasonable trail. If they say on the max of 50, you have to pay 20%, then that means the most we'd get from the rec would be 40,000, then we would pay 60,000, right? If we had to pay 20% of the 50, which is the way the other grants work. You apply for a $50,000 grant,
Right,
and
right,
you have to raise your hand and say you'll pay 20%, so
Right.
then the actual money to the town would be 40,000.
That's very, I mean,
right, that's right.
it's good you said
That's
that.
right.
That's a good lead into our next.
Yes, and so we already have, right now, we have whatever it is, 67,000, I don't know exactly how much we have.
Yeah.
So we already have
We have not.
$67,000. So if we got another 50,000, then that would be more than enough, or 40,000, say, then that would be, with the estimate of, I think the estimate that Junior gave was no more than 100,000, possibly 80,000 to do the trail. So somewhere within those parameters. So we would have enough money to do it.
Still subject to what the wetlands people say.
That's the whole
Exactly.
issue.
It is subject to that.
Right,
So
but
we-
they have walked it. They walked it when Du Bois and King, before they did their final report. All the wetlands people and the water people came. And they didn't say that it's not possible. They did say what they preferred. But none of the options were non-negotiable and not an option. So I think
Well,
that,
I'm just saying the budget is just a guess until we know what we have to do.
right.
And if they come back with a really expensive option, as the preferred route, and you guys don't want to do a V-Trans, then we're going to have to come up with another plan because,
Right.
Was it Lucy from Du Bois and King? Is that her name?
yeah.
I think what I learned with the last grant application is that the select board technically is submitting the application, not just a support letter, but that,
Oh, the town
The-
submits.
yes.
Yes, the town submits
So
the
that-
grant
yeah.
application.
I think with the last application, it got there, but it was originally presented as just needing a letter of support from us. But really, I think we had to sign the application, even though you guys do all the legwork.
Yeah, that's been true of all the grants that we've done.
Yeah.
It's the same process, yes, because the town is asking for that
For,
money.
right, they're responsible to,
Right.
So other than us saying, if everybody agrees, that plan that you've described makes sense. Apply for a grant in the time frame you said. I mean, there's not too much you can do until you hear what the wetland folks gonna say.
So the other thing that I think we want to talk about is that we won't know whether or not we get that grant until April or May. We would definitely like to get this State Park Road section of the trail done. We are thinking about also asking for $30,000 for the budget next year to say.
To the 67.
To add to the 67. So whether or not we get the grant, we would still have $97,000. And then, depending on what the permit says, Jim said he's out of town, but he can start in August. So I think it would only take a couple months for the wetland permitting to be done. So we would know in the fall what they say would be the best option.
Problem with the voters don't wanna vote the 30,000 if there's a pending grant.
Well, but then, the next section of the trail
is to go north from co-housing.
So you could
So
just-
we would just.
So we could take that
Move
30,000
right
and
on.
put it into
Yeah.
the next section of the
And
trail.
if it was done in a separate article, it could be earmarked. So that there wasn't the confusion of it being fungible money, that it was really dedicated. If this grant didn't happen, it would go towards this section of the trail, and there wouldn't be any surprises
Right.
in the future with that money.
Right, yeah,
So we just wanted to put that out in advance.
right.
So you guys know what we're thinking and.
So the application you just told us will go in when, in September? Is that what you just told us?
No, I think that there's a preliminary application process, and I think it's either November 1st or December 1st that it has to go in. I have to look at, I haven't gone online to see exactly what it is this year. So, and then the grant application comes up after that. So I think for both of those, we would need select board approval prior to putting in the preliminary application and then again the regular application.
So is everybody on board? No votes needed right now, right? Just
No, we
The
just,
minutes of the
this is more
meetings.
an informational
Yeah.
kind of meeting. I mean, just, and to hear if anybody has any real concerns or supports or whatever.
Do you know if that, the Forest Parks and Rec monies are coming as a pass-through from the feds, or if it's a
They
state
have
initiative?
they have
It's federal.
Funds as well.
So are
They
they,
have funded us in the past. And
They have?
They like to continue.
Yeah, Sherry Winnie there, when we finished co-housing, she and Dean and I actually walked it, and, you know, she loves the trail. She absolutely, now, that doesn't mean that she's gonna give us money, but it does mean that, I think she sees the value
and
in
it's
the
been a
trail.
while too, because I've heard about donor fatigue, but you haven't really gone to
Right.
this funding source in a while, so
Sure,
that
yeah, it's
could
probably
help.
been about 4 years, maybe, or so, yep,
Cool.
so, yeah,
Great.
okay.
Sounds like a plan.
Great. The only other things I want to say is the map, that we're working on the map. I know we had put money in our budget for starting July 1, and we're already working on that.
Trails map of
Trails
Charlotte.
map of all the trails in Charlotte.
Lori is working on it. Let's just be clear about that.
Well, and 2 of our former Trails Committee members are a design firm down in Virgins, and they are, I mean, they
Are
do.
you working with them?
Green Mountain Power, yeah, they're doing it for us.
Oh, my goodness.
They're doing it for us, yeah.
They're
So we're
pros.
paying them like $500, but that wouldn't even cover them just looking
No,
at
they're
it.
pros. They
And the
do-
rest is gonna
yeah.
be pro bono. So anyway, I'm very excited about
They
it.
do Green Mountain Power's website. They've done some very high profile. They're really good.
They're very good, so.
I had no idea. That's really good. news, yeah.
Yeah, so, and it might be ready by the time the Underpass celebration starts in September, we'll see.
Wow.
See how that goes, yeah. And I just wanted to show you all, if you go on the trail, we've already put some of these up, but one of the big discussions is always about pets. I'm gonna say pets, not necessarily dogs, but other creatures as well. So we have started putting these up, and we'll put more up wherever the trail kind of comes together.
Is that a standard? I mean, did I see that in Mount Flatlow? Is that a standard sign?
I got it online,
Yeah.
so, but, you know, yeah, it is a standard sign. And then we're looking into poop bags, another exciting thing that we're doing. But anyway, but I think important, and we will have, you know, some dispensaries and different
Is
places.
this
on the
on
trail as well.
Peace Mountain? Do you have those on the Peace Mountain trails?
Not yet.
We don't. Good idea. I think that they probably should go on all of them. So I can certainly order more.
And then is it on Mount Philo? Are those on Mount
They're-
Philo?
I think they are, but it's not our,
It's not our jurisdiction,
It's not our
but they do
jurisdiction.
have the bags and they have the
Yeah.
statement there, yeah. Not that it works, but, yeah.
Show me everyone.
So, yeah, and so you all have seen these on the trail, and we have been putting these up on the trail. And then we also, if you all remember the 250 loop, when we did the 250th. Yeah, so we ended up getting the Charlotte Village Loop, we're calling it the Charlotte Village Loop. And that's a trail that goes by the old Lantern and down by the health center and up and around through the Burns property and the flea market. It goes down through that woods and everything.
So we are gonna start putting these up on that trail as well. It's all mowed, it's being mowed and everything, so we have smaller ones and the bigger ones, so depending on where we are on the trail, we're gonna put those up too, so they kind of coincide. I think the link trail and the loop trail go very well together, so.
And then the last thing this summer that we're hoping to do is to start clearing the easement on the Mac farm.
Yeah, we're gonna talk
Does
to
that
Robert
mean
Mack.
clearing, like physical clearing, or, okay.
So people can start using it. A lot of it goes, Mike and I walked it, and a lot of it goes along Robert's farm. But then it dives into the woods, and it actually goes very far into the woods there. And so we actually found that four-corner spot. That's the
Survey stake, you mean?
the spot that literally you can walk over where we need the easement. That's got I should have the map here. But there's one area that's got 4 property owners, and Robert is one of them, and Rosemary is one of them. And we found that spot, and it is deep in the woods. It is not near anyone's house at all. So so we're gonna be working with those landowners, and we're starting to make that part of the trail usable.
Yeah, that's our fall project, is to try and get the easements on those properties that would lead right up into that MAC property. So if we get this summer, if we can get that section, the MAC section, starting to clear that and work with Robert, then.
Do you want to tell them about our section at all?
There's a lot of the trail that's done once we get to town, like Mike and Margaret's land and. Yeah.
Like our section is pretty done, it's usable. I was not at the Trails Committee meeting, and if I was, I would have to recuse myself anyway, but Lori, you ran the meeting. And basically I was saying, should we open this to the public and start advertising it?
I think that you need to legally change the easement.
So we do,
I think that's the one thing,
we need
but-
to meet with you, probably Mike and I need to meet with you and just talk about our easement. Because some of it, there's a trail that goes from the train station to our place, and that's on state park, that's on state-owned land. And there is a very passable trail. It's really nice. There's tons of parking there. People are already using it. Some people are walking their dogs back there, and runners use it. But we haven't advertised it or put it on any map because part of it is on state-owned land.
So would you use the state land or your land?
Both.
Okay.
I mean, it goes,
Once you go through the state
Because-
land, it gets to the Russell property, and then it goes all the way down to Lake Road.
because our easement actually goes up over the tracks onto Robert's land to Greenbush Road, and you can't have the trail go over the railroad tracks. So over the last 10 years, Mike and I have been coming up with an alternative. So sometime, if we want to open that up to the public, we need to be dealing with that issue. That's all.
Well, thank you.
Come
Lots of
along.
Progress.
Thanks.
Exciting.
It is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Municipal Roads Permit?
Yep.
Is that
The state created a new permit program that towns need to apply to for controlling stormwater discharges from municipal roads. And the first step is a notice of intent, which the deadline for that is July 31st. There's a fee, there's a fee that's broken into 2 parts, but basically the total is $640. It's a new fee, it wasn't budgeted, but it's basically a requirement.
Where's the money come from? Is there a select board budget, or?
We bill the state.
Do that?
We can bill the state and they'll reimburse us.
Okay. Oh,
No. This is leveraging money for basically the Lake Champlain cleanup and monitoring programs. And it's basically a municipal tax in the form of an application fee. And it'll be done annually. It also creates a system for them to inventory where the bigger problems are with sediment wash off, water pollution into the lake, and sets up the funding to have some state employees that can create standards and then help towns meet those standards in the future. So it's new, but it's kind of been in the works for a couple of years.
Was this date put in the wrong place?
What was the question, Frank?
Section B, number 1. You checked yes, but you put a date on no.
Section B, has the road erosion been completed? It has been, so what was the question?
You have a date and the if no part of that, rather than if yes, date completed?
If the municipality rely on another town entity for road maintenance.
I'm assuming this August 1st, 2017.
Oh, if yes, date
should have
completed.
been-
Oh, I see what you're saying. Oh, right, the date's in the wrong place. Yes, you're right. Okay, thanks. Yep.
Oh, so the date goes up above.
Yeah, right.
Very good catch, Frank. Wow,
Still on European time.
that's good. Okay. So don't we need to have this filed to be eligible for other grants? Is that what? did you-
Yeah, it's, I mean, we have been receiving money, and we seemingly will receive another grant to basically implement this through money that basically Junior uses to do ditch repair, or ditch rock lining and whatnot. So, yeah, we are paying up front, but we are getting money back.
So is there a motion to approve this as amended?
Make a motion to approve the Municipal Roads General Permit for stormwater discharges for the sum of $640.
Second.
Be signed by the chair.
Yeah. Yes.
Any
Signed by
further,
the chair.
any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anything else that needs to be discussed? Got to get Carrie out of here now. I'm trying to stay on schedule.
Before 9.
It's done
Oh,
very
yeah, we
well.
got to hear who the new Supreme Court judge is going to be. Any other business to be brought up? Don't
Motion
this,
to adjourn?
this is that seconded?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Don't forget to sign the warrant, guys. Thank you.